That afternoon she rowed to the end of the world and saw a man emerging from the sea. She didn't know he held a secret. He didn't know she would change everything. What began on that beach could destroy reputations, but promised to be a love that would challenge entire conventions. If you love historical romances that sweep you away, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This small gesture helps us grow and take our stories further and further. Anne Hartley knew that this escape would cost her a reprimand, perhaps two, but she rowed anyway. The salty wind whipped her face as she walked, leading her mare down the narrow path that descended toward the coast. The sky, heavy with grey clouds, promised rain before nightfall, and the air smelled of sea spray and freedom, two scents her mother would consider equally improper for a young lady of her position. She wore simple attire, a dark wool dress devoid of the ruffles and bows that Mrs. Hartley insisted on imposing, and a thick cape that concealed any trace of refined femininity. She preferred it that way. She preferred to feel anonymous, invisible, free from the expectations that suffocated her within the walls of Hartley Manor. "Miss Anne, please slow down," Margaret's voice sounded behind her, laden with worry and fatigue. "The path is slippery. If you fall—" "I won't fall, Maggie," Anne replied without turning her head, but softened her tone. Margaret did not. How deserve her impatience? "Trust me. I trust you. It is the ground I do not trust." Anne smiled discreetly. Margaret Poole had been her lady's companion for 5 years, since Anne turned 17. She had been chosen by Mrs. Hartley for being discreet, loyal, and above all vigilant, but over time something more subtle had developed between them, a silent complicity. Maggie disapproved of the escapes, yes, but she never reported them. "We're just going to the beach," Anne said, lightly touching the mare's neck. "To breathe some fresh air. There's no crime in that." "There is no crime, miss. But there is recklessness." Margaret adjusted the shawl over her shoulders, battling the wind that insisted on messing it up. "Your mother will be worried if we delay." "My mother has been worried since I was born." The phrase came out more bitter than Anne intended, but it was true. Nothing she did seemed sufficient. Her posture was never upright enough. Her smile was never warm in the right measure. Her responses to suitors never had the balance between modesty and interest that Mrs. Hartley judged necessary to secure a good marriage. And Anne felt herself disappearing under the weight of these demands. The path finally opened to the beach. The rough sea stretched out before them, vast and indifferent, crashing against the rocks with a violence that Anne found strangely comforting. Here, no one expected anything from her. The Kai. Wind did not care about her lineage. The waves did not ask about her musical endowments or her fluency in French. She dismounted and walked to the water's edge, feeling the wet sand give way under her boots. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with that air that smelled of salt, seaweed, and something indefinable. Perhaps it was vastness itself. "Miss," Margaret called, approaching carefully. "Don't go too far. The tide can rise quickly." "I know, Maggie." But she did not move away. She stood there motionless, letting the wind mess up her pinned hair. A part of her wished the tide would rise, that it would swallow her, that it would carry her away from boring soirees, from empty conversations, from evaluating glances that measured her worth as one assesses a mare before purchase. "Are you all right, miss?" Margaret's question came low, almost timid. Anne opened her eyes and turned. Her companion's expression was one of genuine concern. "I'm tired, Maggie," Anne admitted, and the confession surprised her. "Tired of pretending." Margaret hesitated, then stepped forward. "You pretend less than you imagine," she said, and there was something gentle in her voice. "Your mother may not notice, but I do. You are different from the other young ladies. Not in a bad way, in a true way." Anne felt a lump in her throat, but she loved Maggie's knowing understanding, even if she always seemed too busy following orders to offer. "Empathy. Thank you," she murmured and turned her gaze back to the sea. They stood in silence for a few moments. The sound of the waves filled the space between them, and Anne felt something akin to peace. Brief, fragile, but real. "Miss Anne," Margaret said eventually, "we need to go back. The sky will pour down soon." Anne looked up. The clouds had indeed darkened, becoming almost menacing. A distant thunder growled on the horizon. "Just a few more minutes," she pleaded. Please, Maggie." Margaret sighed but nodded. She moved a few steps away, allowing Anne her stolen moment of solitude, and it was then that Anne saw it. Or rather, she saw the structure that rose on the top of the cliff to the north, white and imposing against the grey sky. The lighthouse. It had always been there, of course, but Anne had never paid much attention. Now, however, it seemed to call her. There was something in its majestic solitude that echoed hers. "Maggie," she called without taking her eyes off the tower. "Who tends the lighthouse?" Margaret approached again. "A lighthouse keeper, I suppose. I don't know who. Why?" Curiosity. But it was not just curiosity. It was something deeper, more visceral. A restlessness that pushed her towards that white tower, as if there, on top of that wind-swept cliff, there were answers to questions Anne did not yet know how to formulate. "Miss, we must go," Margaret insisted, this time with firmness. "The storm is coming fast." Anne agreed but cast a final glance at the lighthouse before turning. She did not know why, but she was certain she would return. And when she returned, something would change. Something was already changing. Anne returned 3 days later. She told her mother that she wished to ride to clear her mind before Mrs. Pembroke's soiree. Mrs. Hartley frowned but consented, as long as Margaret accompanied her, naturally. An unmarried young woman never went out unescorted, not even to ride on lands adjacent to the family estate. The sky was different this time. Clear, a pale blue that made the coast seem less hostile. The tide was low, exposing stretches of golden sand dotted with algae-covered rocks. The air still smelled of salt, but there was something softer about it, perhaps the promise of a spring that was slow in arriving. Anne guided the mare down the same path, but this time she did not stop at the water's edge. She continued, following the coastline north, where the lighthouse rose solitary on the cliff. "Miss Anne, where are you going?" Margaret asked, clearly apprehensive. "Just exploring, Maggie. Exploring is not proper for—" "I know what is proper." Anne cast her a glance over her shoulder, but without harshness. "I will be in sight, I promise." Margaret did not seem convinced, but remained a few yards behind, as she always did when Anne insisted on her moments of relative solitude. The deserted beach stretched out before her, marked only by the footprints of seabirds and the irregular tracing of the waves. Anne took a deep breath, feeling the cold wind penetrate through her cape. There was something purifying about that place, something that made her feel less imprisoned, but something immediately captured her attention. A man emerging from the sea. Anne instinctively pulled the reins, paralyzing the mare. For an instant, she thought she was seeing an apparition, some creature born of the legends that fishermen told in the taverns. But no, it was real, entirely real. He came out of the water with slow, deliberate movements, as if the sea were his natural territory. He wore trousers and a shirt, both soaked, the fabric clinging to his body in a way that left little to the imagination. His dark hair fell wet over his forehead, and drops of water ran down his face, neck, shoulders. Anne should look away. She knew it, but she couldn't. He was beautiful, not in the polished, restrained way of the gentleman she knew, but in a raw, more vital way. There was strength in him, not just in his broad shoulders or his erect posture, but in something less tangible, a kind of presence that filled the space around him. He saw her. He stopped a few feet from the dry sand, wiping his face with the back of his hand, and his eyes met hers. He did not look away. He did not bow, nor pretend he hadn't noticed her. He just watched her, with an expression Anne could not decipher. Finally, it was he who broke the silence. "Pardon me, ma'am, I did not expect company." His voice was deep, educated but without subservience. There was a refinement in it that contrasted with the simple clothes and the wet state he was in. Anne regained her composure, or tried to. "The fault is mine," she said, hearing her own voice sound sharper than she intended. "I did not know the beach was occupied." He raised an eyebrow, and something that could be amusement flashed across his face. "Occupied is generous, I would say invaded. By the sea, that is." He indicated his soaked clothes with a vague gesture. "There is a treacherous current out there. I wish to test it." Testing a treacherous current seems reckless, perhaps. But knowing the sea requires occasional recklessness. Where would the joy of life be without a little challenge? Anne did not answer immediately. There was something about the way he spoke, not just the words but the rhythm, the careful choice of each syllable, that suggested education. reading, but with an incomprehensible magnetism to her. It was not the speech of a common worker. "Are you the lighthouse keeper?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. "I am." He took a few steps toward the dry sand, but maintained a respectful distance. "Evander Rowden, at your service." He did not bow, but inclined his head in a way that implied a reverence. The gesture was subtle, almost instinctive, and completely out of place for someone of his supposed standing. Anne hesitated. Should she introduce herself? Maggie would certainly say no, but Maggie's logic seemed distant, irrelevant, before this man who watched her with clear, attentive eyes. "Anne," she said finally, omitting her surname. It seemed safer that way. "Anne." He repeated the name slowly, as if savoring the sound. "It is a pleasure, Miss Anne." There was a brief silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of soirees when conversations died, and only embarrassment remained. This one was different, charged, full of something Anne could not name, but that she felt running down her spine like an electric current. "Do you ride here often?" Evander asked, breaking the spell. "No, I mean," Anne corrected herself, "this is my second visit." "Then, I am doubly fortunate." There was teasing in the tone, but also something more serious, genuine interest, perhaps. Anne felt the heat rise up her neck and was thankful for the cape that concealed some of her blush. "Do you dive often?" she countered, trying to regain some control over the conversation. "When necessary. The lighthouse requires constant vigilance, and knowing the sea is part of that." "It sounds lonely." "It is." He did not deny it, and Anne appreciated the honesty. "But there is worse company than solitude." "Such as?" "People who speak, but without truly saying anything." Anne blinked, surprised by the answer. Then, before she could stop herself, she laughed. Not a polite, restrained laugh, but genuine, spontaneous. The kind of laughter Mrs. Hartley would consider vulgar. Evander smiled. Not much, but enough to completely transform his face. The severe lines softened, and Anne realized he was even more appealing when he smiled. "You agree, then?" he asked. "Entirely." Another silence, but this time Anne felt no need to fill it. It was comfortable, in a way, as if they both understood that some things did not need words. The wind blew harder, flapping Anne's cape and bringing with it the smell of sea spray mixed with something she identified as lamp oil, likely coming from the lighthouse. "Miss Anne," Margaret called from a distance, finally gathering the courage to approach. "We need to go back. Mrs. Hartley expects you for tea." Anne turned, annoyed by the interruption, but Maggie was right. They had lingered too long. "When?" She turned her gaze back to Evander. He was observing Margaret with a neutral but attentive expression. Then his eyes returned to Anne. "I do not wish to delay you," he said, taking a step back. "You are not delaying me." Nevertheless, he inclined his head again, and this time Anne noticed the instinctive elegance of the gesture. It was not something learned in taverns or on docks. This man made her curious, or being part of it. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Anne. I hope the tide brings you back." Anne was surprised by his words, as if she were part of the sea, something wild and inevitable. She did not trust her own voice. She just nodded, turned the mare, and began to ride back. But when she was at a safe distance, she could not resist. She looked over her shoulder. Evander was still there, standing on the beach, watching her. He did not wave. He did not smile. He just remained motionless, an imposing, lonely figure against the vastness of the sea, as if he were the lighthouse itself. And Anne knew with absolute certainty that she would return. Not for the beach, not for the fresh air or the freedom, but for that man who in just a few minutes already fascinated her more than anything she had ever seen in her life. The drawing room at Hartley Manor was bathed in soft afternoon light when Anne descended for tea. Her mother was already waiting for her, seated in the green damask armchair she had occupied for 20 years, with an unwavering upright posture, even during moments of rest. "Anne, dear, sit down." Mrs. Hartley indicated the chair opposite her. "We need to talk about tomorrow's soiree." Anne obeyed, adjusting her skirts as Margaret placed the tea tray on the side table. The aroma of bergamot filled the room. "Yes, Mother, Mr. Wickham will be present." Mrs. Hartley poured the tea with precise, measured movements. A distinguished man, a baronet, as you know, recently widowed, but in a respectable manner. His wife passed away 2 years ago. Anne accepted the cup, feeling the weight of what was to come next. "He has shown interest in getting to know you better." her mother continued without averting her gaze. Your father and I consider it prudent to encourage him. Prudent, Anne repeated, the word sounding hollow in her mouth. You will be 23 soon, Anne. We cannot postpone indefinitely. The phrase hung in the air like a sentence. Anne sipped her tea, purposely burning her tongue, just to feel something concrete, something that was not the silent pressure that had always suffocated her. I understand, she murmured. Excellent. Then you will wear the blue dress. It favors your complexion. And remember, smile, but do not laugh loudly. Answer when questioned, but do not monopolize the conversation. Show interest, but not excessive enthusiasm. Anne nodded mechanically, memorizing instructions she already knew by heart. As always, she was expected to exist in shades of grey, never too vibrant, never too muted, always at the exact limit between presence and invisibility. When she was finally dismissed, she went up to her room and found Margaret folding her clothes. Maggie, she said softly, closing the door. I need to go out. Margaret looked up, alarmed. Miss, your mother just... I know what my mother just said. Anne approached, lowering her voice even further. Please, just an hour, maybe 2. Miss Anne, I can't take it anymore, Maggie. The words came out raw, desperate. If I don't breathe, I will suffocate. Margaret looked at her for a long time, then sighed. 1 hour, not a minute more. The mare knew the way now. Anne barely had to guide her as they descended the familiar path toward the coast. The day was cool, cloudy, with the wind carrying the scent of distant rain. When they reached the beach, Anne dismounted and walked to the water's edge, letting the wind undo the strands of hair that insisted on escaping her hairdo. Maggie walked in the opposite direction, leading the mare at a slow pace, admiring the landscape and giving Anne the privacy she so treasured. After a few moments, Anne closed her eyes, filling her lungs with that air that seemed to carry promises of distant places. The tide has brought you back. The voice came from behind, deep and calm. Anne turned quickly, her heart racing. Evander was a few yards away, wearing simple work clothes, dark trousers, a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. There were oil stains on his hands, and his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his fingers through it distractedly. Mr. Roden, Anne said, trying to sound composed. Just Evander, please. He approached slowly, maintaining a respectful distance. Formalities seem out of place on a deserted beach, where we can be free of conventions, even if only for a few moments. Anne smiled, feeling something relax within her. Then Anne, without further ceremony. Anne. He repeated the name, and again there was that deliberate pause, as if he were savoring the sound. I was working at the Lighthouse when I saw you arrive. I hope I am not interrupting your solitude. You are not. The answer came out too quickly, and Anne felt the blush rise. I mean, your company is not an interruption. Something passed over his face, not exactly a smile, but a softening of the lines around his eyes. I am honored. They stood in silence for a moment, just watching the sea. It was strange how his presence did not seem intrusive. On the contrary, there was something comfortable in that shared silence, as if it dispensed with the need to fill every second with empty words. Have you ever been inside a lighthouse? Evander asked eventually. Never. Would you like to? Anne turned to face him, surprised. Would I like to? To see. It. He pointed to the white tower on the cliff top. It is not a palace, but it has its own majesty. The invitation was completely improper. Anne knew it. Maggie certainly knew it. But the curiosity she had felt days ago returned with renewed force, now mixed with something more. The inexplicable desire to see the world through that man's eyes. She hesitated, glancing at Margaret, who was now a few steps back, clearly horrified. Your companion is welcome, Evander added, following Anne's gaze. Naturally. This seemed to calm Maggie, at least partially. Anne made her decision. Yes, I would very much like to see it. The climb to the lighthouse was steep, the narrow path winding between rocks and low vegetation. Evander went ahead, moving easily over the uneven ground, while Anne followed him carefully and Margaret came behind, muttering silent prayers. When they finally reached the top of the slope, Anne was breathless, but not just from physical exertion. The view was extraordinary. The sea stretched endlessly, the rugged coastline drawing dramatic curves, and the wind blew with almost violent force, as if it wanted to tear them away from there. "It is magnificent," Anne murmured, unable to find more suitable words. "It is," Evander agreed, standing beside her. "Especially at night, when I light the lamp and see the light guiding the ships. There is something comforting about it." Anne looked at him sideways. There was a contained intensity in him, something that went beyond mere professional pride. "The light saves lives," she said, understanding. "It tries." He smiled briefly. "It doesn't always succeed, but it tries." He opened the heavy lighthouse door, and the smell of lamp oil mixed with sea salt invaded Anne's nostrils. The interior was surprisingly clean, organized. A spiral staircase climbed the tower, the steps worn from use. "The work happens up there," Evander explained, indicating the stairs. "But I need to keep everything impeccable. The lens is French, a Fresnel system. It requires daily cleaning." "Do you do everything alone?" "I do. I mean, most of the time. There is another lighthouse keeper who takes turns with me when I need to be away or rest." He walked to a small table where tools were precisely arranged. "It is a demanding job, but honest." There was something in the way he pronounced the last word. Honest, as if contrasting with something else, something that was left behind. Anne did not ask. She felt she shouldn't. Not yet. "May I go up?" she asked instead. Evander hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful with the steps. They are narrow." The climb was long, claustrophobic. Margaret refused to accompany her, staying on the ground floor with a disapproving expression. But Anne continued, following Evander up the endless spiral until they finally reached the top. The lamp room was circular, all glassed in, offering a panoramic view of the coast. In the center, the Fresnel lens captured the faint afternoon light, fragmenting it into 1,000 reflections. "It is stunning," Anne whispered, lightly touching the glass. "Careful." Evander approached, reaching out his hand to guide her. "The lens is delicate." His fingers touched hers only for an instant, but it was enough for Anne to feel an electric current run up her arm. Evander seemed to feel it too, because he withdrew his hand quickly, looking away. "Pardon me," he murmured. "No, it was nothing." But it was. Anne knew it was. They stood in silence, side by side, watching the sea through the glass. The wind howled around the tower, making the entire structure vibrate subtly. "Why are you here?" Anne asked finally. "In this isolated place, doing this job?" Evander did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was laden with something Anne could not identify. "Because I needed silence and distance." "From what?" "From myself, perhaps." Anne turned to face him. He continued to look at the horizon, his expression closed but not hostile. "I understand," she said, softly. He finally looked at her. "You understand?" "Yes." Anne held his gaze, even though she felt her legs tremble. "Sometimes we need to escape ourselves, even if we never succeed." Something changed in his face. The mask of courtesy disappeared for a brief instant, revealing someone younger, more vulnerable. He took a step toward her, then stopped as if fighting an impulse. "You should not understand things like that, miss," he said, his voice husky. "But I do." "Who are you?" The question came out low, almost a whisper. "Where do you come from? Why do you ride alone to a deserted beach dressed as if you wanted to disappear?" Anne looked away, biting her lower lip. "I was born and lived on these lands. I have demanding parents, protective, sometimes suffocating. That does not answer who you are." "I don't know if I can answer that." She forced a sad smile. "Perhaps that's why I come here, to try to find out." Evander watched her for a long time. The light filtered through the glass fell upon her face, highlighting the delicacy of her features, the soft line of her jaw, the elegant arch of her eyebrows, the curve of her lips that trembled slightly under his scrutiny. Her skin was fair, almost translucent, the kind that easily revealed a blush, and she was flushed now, a rosy tone rising up her neck to her cheeks. Her eyes, however, were what captured him most. Brown, deep, with that gleam of genuine curiosity he hadn't seen in years. Pure eyes, not yet hardened by disillusionment. Lively, restless eyes, hungry for something the world would probably refuse to give her. Anne felt completely exposed under that gaze, as if he could see through the simple clothes, through the thick cape, straight into the core of her being. "There is education in you, miss," he said finally, his voice coming out huskier than he intended. In the way you choose your words, in the politeness of your manner, even in the way you incline your head when listening. It was not an inquiry, it was an observation, curiosity mirroring hers. Anne looked away, feeling her heart race. "And there is something about you that does not belong in this place," she replied softly. "I don't know what it is, but it is there." Evander smiled briefly, a sad smile that did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps we are both refugees then, each one fleeing his own version of prison. Perhaps." They stood still, a few steps apart, but it was as if there was something palpable between them, an invisible current that pulled and repelled at the same time. Anne realized she was breathing faster, that her fingers were trembling slightly. Evander also noticed, and something darkened in his eyes before he looked away, clenching his jaw. There were secrets between them. Both knew it, but neither pressed. It was as if there was a tacit agreement. At least here, in this space outside the world, they could be just Anne and Evander, without last names, without titles, without the burden of who they were supposed to be. "The work here must be arduous," Anne said, deliberately changing the subject, her voice still trembling. Evander accepted the truce, relaxing his shoulders. "It is. I wake up before dawn to check the lamp. I need to ensure the oil is at the correct level, that the flame has not weakened during the night." He indicated the lens with a gesture. "Then I clean all this. Every prism, every glass surface, a single speck of dust can distort the light. It sounds meticulous. It needs to be. Lives depend on it." He ran his hand over the lens with an almost reverent care. "During storms, I stay here for days, sometimes without sleeping for long periods, watching, ensuring the light does not go out." Anne imagined him alone, in that tower during stormy nights, fighting against the wind and exhaustion to keep a flame burning. There was something heroic about it, something that contrasted violently with the gentleman she knew, who had never done anything more dangerous than bet on horse races. Anne looked at him. He was a very handsome man. She looked at him, at his oil-stained hands, at his broad shoulders that carried responsibilities in silence, at his face marked by something she could not name. Pain, perhaps, or regret. Suddenly, Margaret's voice resonated from the ground floor, calling for her with a certain trace of fear in her voice. "Well, I think it's late. I need to return home before I get in trouble." "Anne," Evander began, then stopped, as if fighting his own words. The way he pronounced her name sounded different, intimate, almost affectionate. "Yes?" He looked away, clenching his jaw. "Come back, please. I really enjoyed your company. Come back when you can, or wish to." It was not an order, it was a request, almost a plea. Anne felt her heart race. She knew she should refuse. She knew that every visit increased the risk of scandal, of ruin. But when she opened her mouth, the words that came out were, "I will return." Evander let out a breath slowly, without realizing he had been holding it. It was as if that promise relieved him of an invisible weight and nourished a warm expectation in his chest. "Thank you," he murmured. They descended in silence, Anne fully aware of his proximity on the narrow staircase, of the warmth emanating from his body, of the smell of sea and work that seemed to permeate every fiber of his clothing. When they reached the ground floor, Margaret was already waiting for them with a severe expression, but Anne barely noticed her. She was entirely focused on Evander, on memorizing every detail of that encounter before reality claimed her back. At the door, he took her hand, just for an instant, the touch light and respectful, and bowed over it like a gentleman. "Until soon, Anne. Until soon, Evander." And then she left, riding back to a life that no longer fit her. 10 days passed before Anne managed to escape again. 10 days of endless soirees, of empty conversations with Mr. Wickham, of measured smiles and carefully calculated answers. 10 days where her mother watched her with hawk-like eyes, as if sensing that something had changed in her daughter, something dangerous, uncontrollable. And there had. Anne felt it in the way she woke up every morning thinking of the lighthouse, the white tower against the sky, the man who inhabited it. She felt it on the nights she lay awake, recalling the deep timbre of that voice, the warmth of that gaze, the implicit promise in unspoken words. When she finally managed to convince Margaret to accompany her again, the relief was so intense that it almost hurt. The afternoon was clear, the wind softer than usual. Anne rowed faster than she should have, impatient, her heart beating erratically since she first sighted the coast. She didn't know if he would be there. She didn't know if he still thought of her as she thought of him. But she needed to find out. She dismounted on the beach and walked to the water's edge, her eyes already searching for the tall figure, the broad shoulders, the posture that did not bow even before the wind. And there he was, not in the water this time, but sitting on a large rock looking out at the horizon. He turned when he heard her steps on the sand, and something crossed his face. Relief, joy, something deeper that Anne could not name. He stood up, wiping his hands on his trousers, and walked towards her. He stopped at a respectful distance, but his eyes said everything that words could not. "Anne," he said simply, and the name sounded like a confession. "Evander." They stood still, just looking at each other. Anne noticed that he looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well, or as if he had spent nights thinking, just like her. "I thought you wouldn't come back," he admitted, low. "I delayed." Anne forced a smile. "But I promised I would return." "Yes, you promised." The silence that followed was dense, charged with everything they couldn't say. Margaret remained at a safe distance, but Anne knew their time was limited. It always was. "Would you like to walk?" Evander asked eventually, indicating the stretch of beach ahead. "The tide is low, we can go to the rocks to the north." Anne nodded, and they began to walk side by side, with Maggie following a few steps behind. The sound of the waves filled the initial silence, comfortable, as if both were gathering the courage to say things that weighed on their souls. "Was the soiree tedious?" Evander asked eventually. Anne looked at him, surprised. "How do you know there was a soiree?" "I imagined." He looked away at the sea. 10 days is long enough for social events, and you seem someone who is obligated to attend many of them." Anne laughed, but the sound came out bitter. "Tedious doesn't begin to describe it. Hours of conversations about the weather, about the health of people I barely know, about music I've heard hundreds of times. Do you play? Piano? Harp?" She shrugged. "Everything a young lady must play to be considered accomplished." Evander looked at her, sideways, and there was something tender in his expression. "But do you like it? To play, I mean. Not because you must, but because you wish to." The question caught Anne off guard. No one had ever asked that before. Music was an obligation, an adornment, a tool for matrimonial conquest. It wasn't about desire. "I like the harp," she admitted after thinking. "There is something in the vibration of the strings that calms me, as if each note were a breath. Then it is not a complete waste of time." "No, but it is not my choice either." Evander stopped walking, turning to face her. "What would you choose? If you could, if the world were different?" Anne felt her chest tighten. The question was dangerous, because it brought forth desires that she had buried deep, that she pretended did not exist. "I don't know," she murmured. "Perhaps travel. See places I only read about. See the sea from other ports. Have conversations that matter, with people who think." She hesitated, then added, "Choose who I spend my time with. Choose how I spend my days." "Ah, yeah, freedom. Yes." The word came out as a sigh. Freedom. Evander was silent for a long moment, his gaze lost on the horizon. "I once had freedom," he said finally. "Or I thought I did. But I realized it was another form of imprisonment, expectations I didn't choose, paths traced even before I was born." He turned to her, and there was raw pain in his eyes. Sometimes freedom is not in having everything, but in letting go of what imprisons us. Anne felt tears burn but blinked to contain them. "Is that why you are here? Because you let go?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" Evander looked at her at length, as if memorizing every feature. Regret was not the word. Deliberation, perhaps. Every day, for months. He took a step toward her, closing the distance. But then, the tide brought someone. And now, I don't know anymore if there is anything to truly regret. Anne's heart pounded. He hadn't said her name, but he didn't need to. It was there, in that gaze that pierced her, in that voice that trembled imperceptibly. "Evander, forgive me." He stepped back, running his hand through his hair. "I shouldn't have said that." "No." Anne instinctively reached out, touching his arm. "Please don't apologize for being honest." The touch was a mistake. They both realized it at the same time. Even through the fabric of his shirt, Anne felt the warmth, the contained strength, the way his muscles contracted beneath her fingers. Evander remained completely still, his gaze fixed on her hand on his arm. She should have withdrawn it. Anne knew it, but she couldn't. They stayed like that, frozen, breathing in sync while the world around them disappeared. It was Evander who finally moved away, but slowly, as if it took physical effort. "We should keep walking," he said, his voice husky. Before we do something improper." Anne nodded, unable to trust her own voice. They resumed their walk, but something had changed. The air between them was charged, electric. Every silence seemed to scream. Every stolen glance weighed like a touch. When they reached the rocks to the north, Evander stopped and pointed to the dark seaweed-covered formations. "This area is dangerous when the tide rises." He indicated the watermarks on the stones. "All of this gets submerged. I've lost count of how many people I've rescued." "For ignoring the warnings." "You rescue people?" "When necessary, it's part of the job." Anne imagined him diving into rough waters, pulling bodies to safety, fighting currents. Silent heroism, without an audience, without recognition. "I see you are very brave." Evander looked away, uncomfortable with the compliment. "It is only obligation." "No." Anne touched him again, this time on the hand. "Obligation is keeping the light on. Risking your life to save strangers is a choice. A choice that reveals much about your character." He intertwined his fingers with hers before he could think, and both were paralyzed. The touch was improper, too intimate. Margaret was certainly watching, but neither of them moved. His hand was warm, strong, calloused by work, so different from the soft hands of the gentleman Anne knew. He held her firmly, but also with a delicacy that suggested reverence, as if she was something precious, something he was afraid to break. "Come," Evander said, his voice rough. "I want to show you something." He guided her through the rocks, still holding her hand, and Anne felt every step as a delightful transgression. Her heart was beating wildly, her breath was short, and there was a warmth spreading from the point where their skins touched, climbing up her arm, throughout her body. Evander stopped on a higher rock formation from where the entire coastline could be seen. The view was stunning, the sea stretching to infinity, the waves forming hypnotic patterns, the sunlight playing with the foam. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, finally letting go of her hand. The absence of the touch left Anne strangely empty. When the weight becomes too much, it is magnificent. "Yes." He turned to face her, and there was something different in his gaze. More intense, more dangerous. "But it is not the most beautiful sight I have ever beheld." Anne felt the blush explode on her cheeks. He did not look away, did not soften his words with a smile. He just looked at her with that intensity that left her breathless. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "I know." Evander took a step toward her. "But it seems that when I am near you, I forget everything I should and shouldn't do." "Evander?" "Anne." He raised his hand, hesitated, then lightly touched a lock of hair that the wind had released. He did not touch her skin, but the gesture was so intimate that Anne felt as if he had touched her. "Tell me to stop. Say it and I will stop." But Anne said nothing. She just looked at him, breathing with difficulty, feeling the world spin around. Evander let his hand fall, clenching his fist as if fighting himself. "I am foolish," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Completely foolish." "Why?" "Because I know that this—" He gestured between them, unable to find the words. "This cannot be, and yet I cannot pull myself away." Anne felt her chest tighten. The reality, which she had managed to ignore during those stolen moments, returned with brutal force. He was right. This could not be. A lighthouse keeper and a young woman from an aristocratic family. It was impossible, scandalous. It would be her ruin. She began, but her voice failed. Evander watched her attentively, as if reading every thought that crossed her mind. "I need to know," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Who are you, Anne? What family do you belong to?" Her heart raced for completely different reasons now. Fear, panic. "Why does it matter?" "Because He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I need to understand what I am risking." "What you are risking?" Anne looked away, unable to face him. "My family is, demanding, traditional. My father would not allow—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Evander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was laden with painful, understanding. He would not allow his daughter to associate with a simple man, a mere lighthouse keeper. It was not a question. It was a statement. Anne closed her eyes, feeling tears burn. She wanted to deny it, wanted to say it didn't matter, that she would choose him despite everything. But it would be a lie. She knew the consequences. She knew what dishonor meant for a woman. Social ostracism, the shame that would fall not only on her, but on her entire family. "Forgive me," she whispered. "There is nothing to forgive." Evander took a step back, creating a safe distance between them. "The fault is mine. I should not allow this to go so far." "Don't say that." "But it is true, Anne." He ran his hand over his face, and for the first time she saw him truly shaken. "You are young, and seemingly from a good family. You have a reputation to protect, a future to preserve, and I have nothing to offer but conversations on deserted beaches and a life of isolation." "It is not nothing," Anne protested, her voice failing. "To me, it is not nothing." Evander looked at her at length, and there was so much tenderness on his face that Anne felt her heart break. "To you, perhaps not, but to the world it is everything." He took a deep breath. "I do not want to be the cause of your ruin, Anne. I could not bear to carry that weight. Can we not talk about this now? I don't want to spoil this moment." He remained silent, clearly struggling internally. Finally, he reached into his pocket and took out a piece of paper and a piece of charcoal. "Sit with me," he asked, indicating a flat stone. "Please, just a few more minutes." Anne obeyed, sitting beside him. Evander rested the paper on his knee and began to draw, not quickly but with deliberate attention, each line carefully traced. Anne watched, fascinated, the concentration on his face, the way his fingers held the charcoal, the curve of his shoulders bent over his work. When he finished, he held out the paper. It was a delicate yet powerful symbol. Intertwined waves forming an infinite knot, the elegant tracing suggesting perpetual movement. "What is it?" Anne asked, touching the paper with reverence. "A sailor's knot." Evander turned to face her. "It is called a true knot. Once tied correctly, the harder you pull, the stronger it gets. It does not unravel. It does not yield. It resists all storms." Anne looked from the drawing to him, understanding what he was not saying aloud. "It is beautiful. Keep it." He closed her fingers over the paper, holding her hand for a moment. "And know that, no matter what happens, this," he squeezed lightly, "this is true, no matter what the world says." A tear rolled down Anne's face. Evander raised his free hand, hesitated, then wiped the tear with his thumb, the touch so delicate that she barely felt it. "Don't cry," he whispered. "Please, not because of me. I can't help it. It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me. It touched me deeply." Evander let his hand fall but held her gaze. "I love your company, Anne, more than I should, more than is sensible." He took a deep breath. "I would love for you to come back, but I do not want you to put yourself at risk because of me. It's not worth it." "It is," Anne said vehemently. "It is worth it to me. Even if it costs your reputation, your future." Anne did not answer, because she didn't know the answer. She wanted to say yes, that she would give up everything, but she was afraid, and honesty prevented her from lying to him. Evander nodded, as if the lack of response was answer enough. "Be cautious," he said, standing up and reaching out his hand to help her. "Think carefully before returning, and know that, if you decide not to come back, I will understand." "But you—" Anne hesitated, still holding his hand. "Do you want me to come back?" Evander pulled her lightly, closing the distance between them. His eyes traveled over her face, her lips, her flushed cheeks, her still moist eyes. "More than breathing," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I want even more for you to be safe, for your future to be protected." He released her hand and took a step back, creating a safe distance again. "You will always know where to find me, Anne. Always. The tide brings me back every day, just as it brings you, if you wish to. Come, I will be here, but the choice must be yours, and you must be aware of everything you risk." Anne held the drawing against her chest, feeling the paper warm beneath her fingers. "I need to go back," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I know." She turned to leave, but after a few steps she looked back. Evander was exactly where she had left him, motionless against the backdrop of rocks and sea, the wind ruffling his hair. but there was no defeat in his posture. There was something more, determination perhaps, or a silent promise, and Anne knew with absolute certainty that she was lost, completely, irrevocably lost, and the worst, or perhaps the best, was that she did not care. Block 5. The danger. Dawn arrived cold over the lighthouse. Evander climbed the steps for the last time before being released from his shift, meticulously checking every detail of the lamp. The flame was steady, the oil at the correct level, the lenses clean and gleaming. "All in order?" asked Thomas Brennan, the lighthouse keeper, who would replace him for the next 3 days. "Everything." Evander handed him the logbook. "The currents are stronger to the north. Be careful if you need to go down to the beach." "I always am." Thomas smiled. "Going to town then? I need to take care of a few matters. Shouldn't take long." But there was more than just errands. There was the need for distance, for perspective. The meetings with Anne were consuming his thoughts in a dangerous way. Each day that passed without seeing her weighed heavier, and when he saw her, when he held her hand or heard her voice, he felt himself sinking deeper into something that had no future. He needed air, reality, reminders of the world beyond that beach. He descended from the lighthouse, changed his clothes in the small house next door, opting for more presentable attire, though simple, and walked along the road that led to the town. Mrs. Ashford's dressmaker's shop was the type of establishment Anne had frequented since childhood. Elegant, discreet, with imported fabrics and delicate embroidery that made the local ladies sigh with envy. Anne, however, sighed with boredom. "This color favors your complexion, dear," Mrs. Hartley said, examining a roll of sky blue silk. "And Mr. Wickham mentioned to your father that he appreciates blue on a lady." Anne forced a smile, while Margaret remained silent behind them, holding lace samples. "Yes, Mother. We will need at least 3 new gowns." Mrs. Hartley turned to the dressmaker. "One for the Pemberton ball, another for the dinner at the Viscount's residence, and a third for the municipal assembly." "Certainly, Baroness." Mrs. Ashford curtsied slightly. "I have some pieces that would be perfect for Miss Anne." "Baroness." The title echoed in the environment, clearly marking the family's position. Anne felt the familiar weight of that sound, not the weight of privilege but of expectation, of duty, of the gilded cage that had always suffocated her. While her mother and the dressmaker discussed finishing details, Anne approached the window, watching the busy street. Ordinary people coming and going, performing daily tasks, living lives she would never have. It was then that she saw him. "Anne, dear, pay attention," her mother called, impatient. Anne turned, forcing concentration. "Yes, Mother, pardon me." Evander stopped in front of a shop window, feigning interest in the displayed goods, but actually watching the reflection of the dressmaker's shop across the street. It had been pure coincidence. He was on his way to the lawyer when something caught his attention. A familiar movement, a silhouette he knew even from a distance. Anne. But not the Anne in simple attire and a thick cape. This one was different, completely different. The gown was a deep emerald green, the fitted bodice highlighting her delicate waist, the sleeves puffed at the shoulders. The fabric was clearly expensive, imported. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, a few curls framing her face in a way that left Evander breathless. She wore white kid gloves and discreet earrings that caught the light. She was stunning, and completely out of his reach. Evander watched her through the reflection, noting every detail, the way she maintained her erect posture, even when clearly bored, the polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, the contained resignation in every gesture. She wasn't just from a good family, he already knew that, but now he realized the extent of the distance between them. The clothes, the bearing, the way people bowed slightly when passing the older lady next to Anne, minor nobility, perhaps a baronet's daughter, possibly more, and he was a lighthouse keeper. The life he chose, wasn't it? Evander briefly closed his eyes, feeling the weight of reality crush any illusion he still harbored. Even if he revealed his true identity, even if he returned to the life he had abandoned, there were complications, reasons why he had left everything behind. He had nothing clean to offer, neither as a lighthouse keeper nor as the man he used to be. He opened his eyes and continued watching. Anne had moved closer to the window now, looking out at the street with a distant expression. For an instant, Evander feared she would see him, but her eyes passed over him without recognition. After all, he was out of context, away from the beach and the lighthouse. It was then that he heard voices coming from the shop. "You need to accept Mr. Wickham's suit, Anne," the older woman, clearly her mother, was saying. "Your father and I are losing patience with your refusals." Evander saw Anne stiffen, her shoulders becoming tense under the green fabric. "I do not love him, mother. Love is a luxury of cheap novels. A sensible lady marries for convenience and learns to respect her husband. Affection comes later, and if it doesn't, then you fulfill your duties anyway." Her mother's voice was growing impatient. "You are no longer a child, Anne. You have refused too many suitors. You will soon be 23. You are getting old for the marriage market." Evander clenched his fists, hating every word he heard. An elegant lady entered the dressmaker's shop at that moment, interrupting the conversation. "Baroness Hartley, what a pleasure to see you." "Baroness." Evander closed his eyes, the last fragment of hope dissipating like sea foam. He turned and walked away quickly before he did something foolish, like entering the shop, like introducing himself, like claiming something he could never have. The carriage swayed gently as they returned to Hartley Manor. Anne looked out the window, lost in thoughts she didn't dare to verbalize. "Miss," Margaret said softly, leaning slightly. "Are you all right?" Anne didn't answer immediately. Then, without taking her eyes off the scenery, she whispered, "I don't know anymore, Maggie." Margaret was silent for a moment, then said, even lower, "It's him, isn't it? The lighthouse keeper." Anne turned abruptly, her eyes wide. "Maggie, I am not blind, miss." Margaret quickly glanced at Mrs. Hartley, who was dozing on the opposite seat, then returned her eyes to Anne, whispering, "And I am not a fool either. I see how you look at him, how he looks at you." Anne felt tears burn. "I can't help it." "I know." Margaret lightly touched her hand. "But you must be careful. What you feel is dangerous." "I know that too." "Do you know?" Margaret squeezed her hand. "Because if your family finds out, Miss Anne, it won't just be a scandal. It will be complete ruin." Anne nodded, unable to speak. When they arrived at the mansion, Mrs. Hartley woke up and immediately resumed her previous tone. "Anne, I need you to understand the seriousness of the situation. Your constant rides are attracting attention. It is not appropriate for a young lady of your position to spend so much time outside without proper supervision. Maggie accompanies me always. A lady's companion is not enough." Her mother descended from the carriage with the help of the footman. "You should be at home, cultivating the necessary virtues. Embroidery, music, household management. You will soon be mistress of your own house, with duties and responsibilities. You need to prepare yourself properly." Anne followed her inside, feeling the familiar sense of suffocation. "And what if I don't want to marry just to maintain social status?" Mrs. Hartley stopped in the middle of the hall, turning slowly. "What did you say?" "I said I don't want to marry just for convenience. I want to choose. I want to feel something genuine." "Genuine?" Her mother laughed, but the sound was cold. "You read too many novels, Anne. A woman's life is not a fairy tale. We cannot afford to choose out of emotional whim. We need to be practical, sensible. Even if that means being unhappy. Happiness is relative. Security is not." Mrs. Hartley approached, her voice low but firm. "Do you want to end up like Miss Pemberton, unmarried at 35, dependent on the charity of relatives?" Anne felt the words like slaps. "I prefer that to living a lie." "Then, you are more foolish than I imagined." Her mother turned and went up the stairs. "Go to your room and think carefully about the future you are rejecting for silly romantic daydreams." Anne climbed slowly, each step weighing like lead. When she reached her room, she closed the door and leaned against it, finally letting the tears fall. She walked to the window and looked out at the lands that stretched as far as the eye could see. Somewhere beyond those hills was the sea, and on the sea the lighthouse. And in the lighthouse, she took the drawing out of her pocket, the sailor's knot Evander had made for her. She ran her fingers over the charcoal lines, feeling the paper already slightly worn from being touched so much, something that cannot be undone, something that resists storms. But would it resist? Would it truly resist? Anne didn't know. She only knew that she was drowning, and that the only person who could save her was the very one she should avoid. On the other side of the region, in the small house next to the lighthouse, Evander sat on the edge of the narrow bed. The house was simple, almost Spartan. A bed, a table, a chair, A bookshelf with few books. Nothing that suggested the man he had been. Nothing that revealed the life he had left behind, except one box, small, made of dark wood, stored at the back of a drawer. Evander picked it up with hands that trembled slightly and opened it. Inside were a few objects. A signet ring, with a coat of arms, a yellow... He held the ring, feeling the weight of the metal, the significance it carried. Power, responsibility, everything he had rejected when he ran away. But now, there was Anne, and Evander realized, with painful clarity, that he was at a crossroads. He could remain hidden, safe in his solitude, protected from expectations and scandals, or he could risk everything, his peace, his refuge, perhaps even his integrity, for a chance, a remote possibility of a future with the only person who had made him feel alive again. He closed the box and put it back. He still didn't know what he would do, but he knew that the time for pretending that this didn't matter was running out, and when it ran out, he would have to choose, and the choice, whatever it was, would cost him everything. 5 days had passed since Anne saw Evander in town. 5 days of silent torture, torn between the desperate desire to see him and the paralyzing fear of the consequences. But that night, when the house finally quieted and even the servants retired, Anne made a decision. She dressed in dark, simple clothes, tied her hair under a scarf and crept down the service stairs, her heart pounding so fiercely she feared waking the entire house. She passed through the deserted kitchen, slipped out the back door, and ran to the stables. The mare whinnied softly upon seeing her, but Anne calmed her with gentle strokes before mounting bareback. There was no time for proper preparations, only an urgent, desperate need to see him. The night ride was perilous. The moon was a crescent, offering just enough light to guide the way, but shadows distorted the familiar terrain. Anne did not care. She followed the well-known path, the cold wind slicing her face, her hair escaping the scarf. When she finally sighted the lighthouse, its light sweeping the sky like a beacon of hope, literally, Anne felt something break inside her chest. Relief, fear, desire, all mixed into an overwhelming emotion that left her breathless. She dismounted at the base of the cliff and scrambled up, stumbling on the stones, her hands scraping against the rough rocks. She felt no pain. She only felt the need to reach him. She knocked on the heavy lighthouse door, panting, trembling, and not just from the cold. The door opened almost immediately, and there he was, Evander. For an instant, he just stared at her, as if disbelieving what he saw. His eyes swept over her face, her disheveled clothes, her loose hair falling over her shoulders. "Anne?" His voice was hoarse, incredulous. "What? How? I needed to see you," she said simply. Evander looked past her into the darkness of the night, then quickly pulled her inside, closing the door. "Are you alone?" The question came out almost as an accusation. "For God's sake, Anne, did you ride all the way here alone at night?" "Yes. You could have fallen, injured yourself, been attacked by... God, I don't even want to think about it. But I wasn't." Anne lifted her chin, despite trembling. "I am here, and I needed to be." Evander ran his hands over his face, clearly torn between relief and panic. "Your family, if they find out you left, they won't find out. They are all asleep. I was careful." "Anne." He took a step towards her, then stopped, clenching his fists. "You shouldn't be here, not like this, not alone, not at night." "I know." Her voice trembled. "But I couldn't stay away any longer. I couldn't breathe without seeing you." Something broke on his face. The mask of restraint collapsed, revealing raw desire, fear, and desperation. "You are killing me," he whispered. "Do you know that? Every time I see you, every word you say, every look, it is destroying me. Then why don't you send me away?" "Because I am weak before you." He took another step, closing the distance between them. "Because when you are near, I forget everything I should remember. All reason, all good sense." Anne closed the remaining distance, standing inches from him. She could feel the heat emanating from his body, the scent of sea and lamp oil that always enveloped him. "Me too," she confessed. "I also forget everything. Family, duty, reputation. None of it matters when I am with you." Evander closed his eyes, his jaw clenched as if fighting against something immense. "I saw you," he said abruptly. "In town, at the dressmaker's." Anne was paralyzed. "You saw me?" "Yes." He opened his eyes, and there was pain in them. I saw you with your mother. In your lady's clothes I heard the title, Baroness Hartley. Anne felt her blood run cold. Evander, you were stunning, the words were whispered. So beautiful I almost didn't recognize you, and I realized how far away you are from me, how impossible this is. No. Anne touched his face, forcing him to look at her. Don't say that. But it is true. You are a baron's daughter. You are the man I love. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to cease. Evander stared at her, his eyes wide, as if she had just confessed something impossible. What did you say? I love you. Tears began to fall, but Anne didn't wipe them away. I don't know when it started. Perhaps that first day on the beach. Perhaps when you showed me the lighthouse. Perhaps in every conversation, every look, every shared silence. But I love you, and I can no longer pretend that I don't. Evander pulled her to him with such force that Anne lost her breath. His arms completely enveloped her, pulling her tightly against his broad chest, his face buried in her hair. Anne, he groaned, his voice broken. My Anne, my God, how I love you too, she sobbed against him, her hands gripping his shirt as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was collapsing. I don't want to marry Mr. Wickham, she said through tears. I don't want to marry any insipid stranger just because it is the correct thing for society. I want freedom. I want to live true love. I want you. Evander pushed her away just enough to raise her face, holding it between his hands. You deserve more than I can offer. You deserve balls, travel, security. I deserve to be happy. Anne held his wrists, her voice firm despite the tears. And I have never been as happy as I am when I am with you. You are the lighthouse of my life, Evander. You are saving me from the shipwreck of my own existence, from drowning in my fears and sorrows. Something in him broke, not into fury, but into pure feeling. Evander let out a choked sound, as if surrendering for the first time to what he felt, and took her mouth. The kiss that followed was neither timid nor restrained. It was urgent, emotional, as if he was trying to convey everything he had never dared to say. Anne felt the impact of that touch, strong and deep, making the ground almost disappear beneath her feet. Evander held her instinctively, keeping her firm against him as the kiss intensified, not through haste but through the truth it carried. Anne responded without hesitation, feeling whole in his hands, letting that surrender completely envelop her. The world around them dissolved, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the gentle trembling of everything they were losing the fear of feeling. When they finally separated to breathe, Evander rested his forehead on her collarbone, eyes closed, trying to regain the control that was clearly escaping him as he inhaled the gentle scent of her hair. Forgive me, he murmured, his voice hoarse. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize, Anne interrupted, touching his face tenderly. Never apologize for loving me. He opened his eyes and Anne saw love, desire, but also anguish. I am unsettled, he confessed. There are decisions I need to make about the future, about who I am, about what I can or cannot offer you. I need nothing but you. Anne, he caressed her face, hypocritical social class conventions should not be an impediment to true love, but they are, and your family will never allow you to marry a simple lighthouse keeper. The tears returned, burning. Then what do we do? Evander was silent for a long moment. Then he gently released her and walked to a small shelf where he kept some personal belongings. He opened a wooden box and took something out. When he returned, he was holding a ring. Anne caught her breath. It was delicate but clearly valuable, gold intricately worked with a deep blue stone in the center, surrounded by small details that sparkled in the faint light. This ring belonged to my mother, Evander said, his voice thick with emotion. It is one of the only things I brought from my previous life, the only thing that matters. He took Anne's hand and slowly slipped the ring onto her ring finger. It was slightly loose, but Anne closed her hand, holding it fast. It is yours, keep it, he asked. As a promise, as a commitment of my heart to yours forever. Even if the whole world says it cannot be, my heart is already yours. It always will be. It will be with you, wherever you go. Anne looked from the ring to him, the tears falling freely now. And what will we do to you? She asked, her voice failing. How? Don't be sad, my love. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. Some storms arrive, Anne, but if the love is true, we resist. We need to be strong. We need to have faith. I have faith in you. She rose on her toes and kissed him again. I have faith in us. The kiss was slower this time, deeper. Evander lifted her slightly off the ground, and Anne wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling that warmth that seemed to finally give shape to what she had always sought. When they separated, Anne whispered against his lips, "Let me stay here tonight, Evander. Please." He took a deep breath, as if trying to organize thoughts that were escaping him. "I don't want to face my fears alone," she continued, her voice trembling. "I just want the comfort of your affection. If fate separates us tomorrow, I want to at least keep the memory of what it is like to be held by the man I love." Evander tensed, his shoulders rigid. "Anne, I cannot cross certain boundaries. You are an innocent lady, and I have principles. I cannot compromise your honor. But I am choosing to stay," she insisted gently. "I ask for nothing more than your presence." "I know." He kissed her lightly, with almost painful tenderness. "And God knows how much I want it too. But some choices have consequences, and you deserve protection, not risks. I desire you deeply, but not in the way you fear, not while I cannot give you my name, not while the world will not allow it." Anne opened her mouth to protest, but he silenced any word with another kiss, this time brief, almost a plea for her to understand. "Just let me care for you," he murmured against her mouth. "Let me offer what I can, my affection, my tenderness, my presence. This, yes, I can give you without fear." He guided her to a blanket near the fireplace and sat down, gently pulling her close. Nay, settled against him, feeling the quiet warmth emanating from his body, the steady sound of his heart beating under her palm. Evander kissed her for a long time, then brushed his lips against her jaw, in a gesture more of devotion than desire. Anne sighed, feeling a new serenity, a kind of closeness that did not demand boldness, only emotional surrender. He intertwined his fingers with hers and raised her hand, kissing each finger with reverence. When he reached her wrist, he pressed, his lips there where her skin vibrated with her nervousness. "Feel that," he murmured against her skin. "It is your heart calling for calm, and mine trying to answer." "Yes," Anne whispered. He turned her wrist and kissed the inner part, a light touch, almost a blessing, and she shivered, not from forbidden desire, but from the silent depth of that gesture. "Trust me," he pleaded, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "Let me be by your side tonight, nothing more." And he was. They spent hours exchanging tenderness, soft kisses, and words they wouldn't dare to say in the light of day. Evander kissed her face, her hair, her temple, as if every detail deserved to be cherished. He caressed her hair, murmured promises that she was not alone, and held her as one protects what they love most. Anne discovered another kind of intimacy, the one born of trust, that warms the chest, that calms the soul. They talked about fears, hopes, loneliness, and dreams held back for years. And when the first light of morning threatened to break the horizon, Evander gently woke her. "Love, you need to return," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "before they notice your absence." Anne nodded, though every fiber of her being wanted to stay. Evander helped her fix her hair, tidied her clothes, then held her face between his hands and kissed her one last time. Long, deep, full of promises. "I will return," she promised. "I know, and I will be here, always." He accompanied her on the descent, staying in the shadows as she mounted. He followed her at a prudent distance throughout the ride back, ensuring her safety without being seen. When they were near Hartley Manor, Evander stopped. Anne turned, meeting his gaze even in the dim light. He brought his hand to his heart, then extended it towards her, a silent but eloquent gesture. Anne repeated the gesture, then turned the mare and rode home. She did not see the figure watching from the shadows near the stables. She did not perceive the eyes that witnessed her furtive return. She did not imagine that the storm Evander had mentioned was about to arrive, faster than either of them could anticipate. One of the servants returning from town at that hour saw Margaret furtively returning via the side path. Scandalized and fearing the worst, after much deliberation, he told the housekeeper, who then called the Baroness and confided the matter. Anne woke up shortly after to violent knocking on her door. "Open this door immediately, Anne." Her father's voice echoed down the corridor, severe, furious in a way she had never heard before. Anne's heart raced. She glanced at the window. The sun had barely risen. She looked at her scattered clothes, still dirty with sand and sea salt from the night before. "Anne!" The knock came again, this time accompanied by her mother's voice, sharp with panic. "Open it now!" With trembling hands, Anne hid the clothes. Under the bed, put on her dressing gown and opened the door. Her father entered like a storm, followed by her mother. Margrethe came behind them, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. "Where were you during the night?" "What? Why, I was here." Her father looked at his clearly terrified daughter's face, the smell of sea air, the slightly disheveled hair. He let out a bitter, impatient laugh. "Do you think I'm a fool, girl? You spent the night away from home. Is that true?" Baron Hartley pointed at her, his voice trembling with contained fury. "Tell me it is not true." Anne backed away, feeling fear constrict her throat. "Father, I did not—" "Jenkins saw you," he roared, returning before dawn, riding like a criminal in disheveled clothes alone. Anne felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "Father, I did not—" "Who were you with?" Mrs. Hartley approached, holding her daughter's shoulders with painful force. "Tell us, who did you spend the night with?" "I didn't. It wasn't like that. You were dishonored, weren't you?" Her mother's voice was broken, hysterical. "My daughter has been dishonored." "No." Anne turned to her, desperate. "It wasn't like that. I did not—" "Then how was it?" Her father took a threatening step. "Explain how my daughter sneaks out at night and returns at dawn with her reputation intact." Anne opened her mouth, but no explanation came. What could she say? That she had spent the night in the arms of a lighthouse keeper, that he loved her, that he had given her a symbolic ring, that he was gentle, that nothing improper or so gravely improper had happened. No one would believe it, and even if they did, it would be ruinous all the same. "There are rumors," her mother said, her hands shaking. "The servants are already talking. I don't know if we can contain them. Soon the whole region may know. That is, if there aren't more witnesses to this thoughtless act of yours, of going out unprotected at night. Do you have no idea of the danger you are in? Heavens, we are ruined, Anne, completely ruined, you foolish, reckless girl." The Baron ran his hand over his face, the fury giving way to something darker, despair perhaps, or deep shame. "Who is this man?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "Tell me who this damn man is, so I can force him to repair the dishonor." Anne hesitated, and it was a fatal mistake. "Say the name." He advanced. "Who is he? Is he suitable to marry you? Is he from a respectable family? Anne's voice failed. He is a nobody, clearly." Her mother interrupted, her voice bitter. "An adventurer, clearly. Someone who took advantage of a foolish young woman's naivety. I bet you will never hear from him again. Oh God, this is a disgrace." "No!" Anne cried out. "He loves me, and I love him. Love!" Mrs. Hartley stepped back, as if struck. "You speak of love while destroying your future? While staining this family's name? How many times have I told you that this idea of romantic love was affecting you? Look where it has led. The regrettable situation you have put us in. Silence, both of you." The Baron raised his hand, commanding order. He turned to Anne, and there was something terrible in his eyes. "Do you understand what you have done? Not just to yourself, but to all of us." Anne lowered her head, the tears finally falling. "And what if—" Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, her voice choked. "You are instructed, my daughter. I have already taught you about these intimate matters. What if there are consequences? A child. You are ruined. What were you thinking?" "But mother, I did not—" A sharp sound of a maternal slap echoed in the room, silencing Anne. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy as lead. "Then there is no choice," the Baron said, his voice empty. "Absolutely no choice." He walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. "Mr. Wickham made an honorable offer. He has shown genuine interest. You have not yet given him an official answer." He turned slowly. "But now you will accept. Immediately." "No," Anne whispered. "No, please." "You have no choice," his voice thundered. "You destroyed any possibility of choice when you decided to act like— He did not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. "But I cannot bear him," Anne pleaded, falling to her knees. "Father, please, I cannot—" "You cannot?" He looked at her with something that could be pity or revulsion. "You should thank the heavens that a man of honor is still willing to offer his name. After the rumors spread, no one else will want you. I prefer to be alone." You prefer ruin. Her mother knelt beside her, holding her face tightly. You prefer to be pointed at in the streets, whispered about on the corners. To be called a... She shuddered, unable to say the "Voorkunde," and if there is a child, Anne, what will you do then? Raise a child in dishonor? Nothing happened, Anne cried. My virtue is intact. But no one will believe that, her father said coldly. You were seen, returning at dawn. That is sufficient. He walked to the door, then stopped. You will tell me the name of this man, or I will find out myself and cleanse your honor. As for the marriage, I will discuss the matter with the baronet tomorrow. In a few weeks the bans will be published. The wedding can happen soon without raising further suspicion. And until then you will not leave this house, not even for the garden, not even with a companion. You are confined to this room. Anne looked at her mother, pleading with her eyes. But Mrs. Hartley looked away, rising with difficulty. You have shamed us, she said, her voice broken. Shamed yourself. I hope it was worth it. And they left, the door closing with a sound of finality. Anne heard the key turn in the lock. She was imprisoned. Margaret quickly approached, kneeling beside her. Oh, miss, she whispered, hugging her. Oh, my poor girl. Anne collapsed into her arms, sobbing. I need to see him, Maggie. I need to tell him what is happening. You cannot. Margaret held her face. You heard your father. You are locked in here. Then you must go. Anne held the lady's hands. Please, Maggie, go to the Lighthouse. Tell him what happened. Ask him to come speak to my father. Ask him to... Miss... Margaret hesitated, conflict evident on her face. I cannot. It is not safe. Why? Because if I go, they might follow me. Maggie's voice was low, urgent. Your father is furious, miss. Furious in a way I have never seen. If he finds out who he is, where to find him... She closed her eyes, shuddering. I saw how he looked at you, how he spoke. He will not just forbid the meeting. He will... She did not finish, but she did not need to. Anne understood. Her father would not seek to talk. He would not seek to understand. He would seek revenge. Reparation in the only way men like him knew. He is not just a lighthouse keeper, Anne whispered, desperate. I know he isn't. The way he speaks, the way he carries himself, there is something more. If my father would just talk to him. Your father will not talk. Not now. Not after this. Margaret held her hands tightly. And if I go there, I will lead your father straight to him. It could put his life in danger, Miss Anne. Do you understand? Your father is blind with fury. If he finds out who he is, I don't even want to think about what he might do. Anne felt a chill run down her spine. Maggie was right. She knew her father's temper. She knew the weight of stained honor in men of his position. Then what? She asked, her voice cracking. Do I simply accept it? Marry Mr. Wickham and pretend none of this happened? I don't know, miss. Tears streamed down Margaret's face. But I know I cannot risk his life nor my job in this house. And you shouldn't risk yourself anymore either. You shouldn't have gone out alone, miss. Anne sank to the floor, hugging her knees, feeling the world crumble around her. He needs to know, she whispered. He needs to know that I did not abandon him, that I did not choose this. He will know. Maggie knelt beside her. Somehow, when it is safe, I will find a way. But not now. Not while your father has eyes in every corner of this property. Anne nodded, even though she knew that later might be too late. But deep down, even as she agreed, a part of Anne was already beginning to doubt. What if he didn't know? What if he thought she had betrayed him? What if it had all been a beautiful but impossible dream, condemned from the start? Anne pushed the thought away, clinging to hope like a shipwreck survivor clings to wreckage. She had to believe, because without hope, there would be nothing left. On the other side of the region, Evander was at the top of the lighthouse when he saw the riders approaching. 3 men, formally dressed, riding with purpose. His heart instinctively tightened. He knew that kind of visit. Official. Inevitable. He quickly descended, each step echoing like a countdown to something he didn't want to face. He met them at the door, the cold wind cutting through his shirt. Mr. Evander Rowden? Asked the man in front, dismounting, with a solemnity that portended bad news. I am he. The man held out an envelope sealed with a crest that Evander immediately recognized. The coat of arms of his family, the rampant lion on a field of blue, a symbol of everything he had left behind. Evander took the envelope with hands that began to tremble. "I deeply regret to inform you, sir." The man spoke with the rehearsed formality of someone who frequently carries bad news, "that your brother, the Earl Rowden, passed away 5 days ago. As the sole surviving heir, the title and properties devolve upon you. Your presence is required immediately for legal matters and succession." The world tilted. Evander felt his legs weaken, and for a terrible instant he thought he would fall. He leaned on the doorframe, the envelope burning in his hands like a hot coal. Dead. Adrian was dead. The last time they saw each other, they had fought. Terrible words were spoken, words Evander had kept like open wounds all those months. "You are a coward," Adrian had said, "running away from responsibilities because you don't have the courage to face them." And Evander had responded with equal cruelty. Better a coward than a prisoner of others' expectations. They parted as enemies, and now there would never be reconciliation. There would never be the conversation Evander had rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind. There would never be forgiveness, only emptiness. "Sir," the messenger's voice brought him back. "Are you well?" Evander forced himself to straighten up, even with his chest constricted, even with something breaking inside him. "How was it?" The words came out harsh. "How did he die?" "Fever, sir. It started suddenly, worsened in a few days. The doctors did all they could, but fever, something so common, so mundane, and it had taken his brother, the heir, the firstborn, the one who had always been stronger, more capable, more suited for the title. And now, Evander, the second son, the problematic one, the one who had run away, was all that was left. "When must I leave?" he asked, his voice sounding more controlled than he felt. "Immediately, sir. The lawyers await. There are properties, tenants, urgent financial matters. The county cannot remain without leadership." Evander looked at the sea, at the lighthouse, at the life he had built there, stone by stone, silence by silence. An honest life, simple, his own. And he thought of Anne, of her eyes filled with love when she promised to return, of her whispered promises in the darkness, of the ring he had given her as an oath of a heart that he didn't know would be demanded back so soon. How can I leave her now? How can I leave without explaining? But he knew the answer. He had no choice. He never had, in truth. He was born for this, for titles, lands, responsibilities that crushed lesser men. He had run for years, but fate always catches up with those who try to escape it. "I need a few hours," he said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "I need to put things in order here." The men exchanged glances, clearly impatient. "Sir, the urgency of the situation—" "A few hours," Evander repeated, and this time there was command in his voice, the voice of an earl, even if he did not yet use the title. "I need to properly transfer my responsibilities. Or would you prefer the lighthouse to be without a keeper tonight?" The man bowed his head, acknowledging the authority. "We will leave at noon then, sir. We cannot delay longer than that." Evander nodded, already turning away, already thinking, "I must write to Anne. I must make her understand. I must—" But what could he say? That he loved her but had to leave. That he would return but didn't know when. That they dreamed of a future, but fate was now turning all the pieces of the game. He climbed the lighthouse stairs with heavy legs, each step an added weight. At the top, he looked one last time at the view that had become his salvation, the infinite sea, the rugged coastline, and somewhere beyond the hills, the woman who carried his heart. "Forgive me, Anne," he thought, closing his eyes against the pain. "Forgive me for not being able to stay and explain this to you, looking into your beautiful eyes." And for the first time since he left his old life, Evander Rowden wept, not for the loss of freedom, but for the loss of the brother with whom he had never reconciled, and for the anticipated longing for the only woman who had made him want to be more than his title demanded. Minutes later, Evander sent for Thomas Brennan. When his friend arrived, he quickly explained the situation and that he was leaving the lighthouse job definitively. He would return to London indefinitely to fulfill family obligations. "I need you to deliver something for me," he said, already writing feverishly. "A young woman will come looking for me. Brown hair, deep eyes, usually comes with a lady's companion. Give her this letter by hand. It is crucial, Thomas, crucial. Please promise me." "You can trust me," his friend promised. Evander sealed the letter, his hands trembling. He handed the letter to Thomas, hugged his friend quickly and left, without looking back, because if he had looked, he wouldn't have had the strength to go. 2 days later, Anne finally managed to escape. Her parents had gone to town to finalize wedding details. Margaret had created a distraction with the maids. Anne ran to the stables, mounted, and rode as never before. She arrived at the lighthouse panting, desperate, her heart beating so violently it hurt. She scrambled up and knocked on the door. A man who was not Evander opened it. "Yes?" Thomas asked, distracted. Smoke was rising from the top of the lighthouse. One of the lamps was having trouble. "Mr. Rudin," Anne said, breathless. "I need to speak to Mr. Rudin. It's urgent." "He left," Thomas said, already turning away. "I'm sorry, miss, but I have an emergency here. The oil leaked and—" "Left?" The world spun. "What do you mean, left?" He went back to his old life. He had commitments only he could fulfill. Thomas started climbing the stairs. "When is he coming back?" "He's not coming back to the lighthouse, miss." He turned in his work. He climbed a few more steps, hastily, and turned back to her. "Sorry, I really need to—" and he disappeared up the stairs, completely forgetting about the letter. Anne stood motionless, alone on the empty threshold. He left, after everything, after the promises, the ring, the vows of love, after touching her so intimately and passionately. He simply left. Anne's legs gave way. She fell to her knees right there on the doorstep, and the sound that escaped her throat was that of a wounded animal. He had abandoned her, while she fought, while her life collapsed, while she was being forced to marry a stranger. He simply walked away. The tears came violently, uncontrollably. Anne hugged herself, rocking, feeling every fragment of hope shatter. She had been foolish, so utterly foolish. She had believed in fairy tales, in true love, in promises whispered in the dark, and now she was paying the price, alone, abandoned, destroyed. Eventually, Margaret came to find her, discovering her still on the ground, her eyes dry but vacant. "Miss Anne, we need to go before they notice." Anne allowed herself to be lifted, guided back to the horse and led home. But a part of her remained there, on the threshold of that lighthouse, waiting for someone who would never return. The House of Lords was exactly as Evander remembered, imposing, suffocating, smelling of old privilege and ancestral power. The marble pillars rose like sentinels. The tall windows filtered light that seemed to judge rather than illuminate. He walked through the main corridor dressed in full black, an impeccably tailored coat, a silk waistcoat, a meticulously tied cravat. Mourning, sobriety, restraint, everything a new earl should display upon assuming a title tainted by untimely death. Older lords bowed slightly as they passed. Some murmured condolences. Others merely watched with that predatory curiosity typical of the nobility, measuring, evaluating, deciding whether he would be weak or strong, manipulable or dangerous. Evander kept his face, impassive, but inside he was a whirlwind. "I scorned this. I ran from this, and now I am here again, wearing the title that was not mine, like golden handcuffs. But there was something different now, a reason, a purpose that had not existed before. Anne. If he remained a lighthouse keeper, he would never be accepted. Her family would never allow a union with a man without position, without title, without the credentials that society demanded. But as Earl Rowden, as an earl, he would be a suitor not just acceptable but desirable. He had land, he had influence, he had the kind of power that opened doors and silenced objections. And if he needed to wear this golden cage again to have Anne, then he would wear it, without hesitation, without regret. For her, he thought, climbing the steps leading to the main chamber. "I do this for her." The secretary announced his entrance with a voice that echoed through the ancient walls. "His lordship, Evander Rowden, Earl of Ashmore, Baron of Westfield, Lord of the lands of—" The list continued, each title an added weight, each honor a chain. Evander walked to the center, knelt before the Lord Chancellor, and swore the vows that sealed his fate. When he rose, he was no longer just Evander, the lighthouse keeper. He was Evander Rowden, the Earl of Ashmore, and he would use every ounce of that power to reclaim the woman he loved. 10 days. 10 days since Anne had been locked in her room. 10 days of silence. Tears and despair that gnawed like acid. She barely ate, barely slept. She spent hours looking out the window, touching the ring hidden beneath her clothes, remembering every word, every touch, every promise that now seemed a cruel illusion. Margaret tried to console her, but what solace was there? Mr. Wickham continued his insistent visits, appearing 3 times a week, punctual as a clock, always bringing flowers, always requesting an audience with Anne, and always being refused. Anne would not receive him. She couldn't. The mere thought of sitting in the parlor and feigning interest in his empty conversations made her nauseous. Her parents were increasingly disconcerted, inventing excuses of indisposition and some feminine crisis that required rest. Mrs. Hartley alternated between pleas and threats to Anne. The Baron remained silent, but his disapproval hung in the air like a storm about to break. "He is a good match, Anne," her mother said repeatedly. "Patient, honorable. He is willing to wait, but not indefinitely. You are making us look ridiculous." But Anne remained apathetic, caught between the pain of loss and the refusal to accept the fate they tried to impose. And Evander had abandoned her. Or had he? Anne wavered between the certainty of betrayal and stubborn sparks of hope that refused to completely die. "He said he loved me. He swore it. He gave me his ring. But men said many things in the heat of passion. And then they left. But he didn't take advantage of her, did he? He showed virtue. He acted practically like a gentleman. Still, he filled her heart with hope and left forever. That morning, however, something changed. Mrs. Hartley entered the room with an expression that mixed determination and exhaustion. "Dress appropriately," she said, placing a gown on the bed. "We are going to the dressmaker's." Anne looked up, surprised by the break in routine. "For what?" "You need new gowns. For social events. You need to be seen. Hold your chin high, silence any rumor that might arise. Being seen at soirées and balls is a good opportunity to be courted socially by Mr. Wickham." Her mother avoided her gaze. "And you also need new clothes for the trousseau. Eventually you will need to be prepared." Anne felt her stomach turn, but she didn't protest. She knew it would be useless. "And afterwards," her mother added, her voice softening slightly, "if you behave like a lady, if you cooperate without complaint, I will allow a brief ride. With Margaret, naturally. Fresh air will do you good." Anne looked up, her heart accelerating. "I can go out?" "Briefly, under strict supervision. I have severely reprimanded Margaret not to be complicit in your escapades." Her mother sighed. "You are too pale, Anne. You look like a ghost. You need sun, movement, but only if you cooperate." It was a small concession, but for Anne it was a lifeline to get out of that room and have a few minutes of freedom. Perhaps she could go to the beach, to the lighthouse, one last time, just to be sure, just to know if he had truly abandoned her or if there was an explanation. She needed to know. Even if the answer broke her heart definitively, she needed to know. The visit to the dressmaker was prolonged torture. Anne stood still for hours while they measured, adjusted, discussed fabrics and finishes. Mrs. Ashford showed silks, laces, delicate embroideries, all intended for a bride's trousseau. "This shade of blue will look divine on you, miss," the dressmaker said, holding out a fabric that Anne barely glanced at. "Yes, perfect," her mother agreed, feigning enthusiasm that neither of them felt. Anne responded mechanically, nodding when necessary, remaining still when ordered. But her mind was far away, on the beach, at the lighthouse, in arms that might never hold her again. Finally, they finished. "Can I ride now?" Anne asked as soon as they left the shop, her voice coming out more anxious than intended. Her mother hesitated, studying her with an indecipherable expression. "You cooperated," she admitted. "So yes, 1 hour, not a minute more. Margaret, don't let her out of your sight, and stay close." "Yes, madam." Anne barely waited for the carriage to stop at Hartley Manor. She ran to the stables, mounted with trembling hands, and set off. Margaret followed on another horse, but Anne barely noticed her. Her heart pounded erratically, hope and fear battling within her chest. "Please," she prayed silently, "please, let there be an explanation. Let there be a reason." They reached the beach under a cloudy sky, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Anne dismounted and walked to the water's edge, to the rock where she had so often sat beside him. She sat down, hugging her knees, and finally let the tears fall. She cried for everything she had lost, for every broken promise, every shattered dream, every stolen moment that now seemed only a painful memory. She cried for the loneliness, for the longing that cut like a knife, for the immense emptiness where hope once lay. Margaret stayed a few meters away, giving her privacy but maintaining discreet watch. And at the top of the lighthouse, Thomas Brennan looked out the window when he saw her, the young woman with brown hair, the one Evander had made him swear to give the letter to, and which he foolishly forgot to deliver. Thank God, he thought, his heart racing. She came back. He ran down the stairs, almost tripping in his haste, the crumpled letter still tucked into the inner pocket of his waistcoat, where he had kept it all those days. Waiting, for he didn't know who she was or how to find her. He reached the beach, panting, and approached cautiously. "Miss?" he called hesitantly. Anne turned, quickly wiping her tears. She recognized him, the man. From the lighthouse, the one who had said Evander had left. "Yes?" Her voice was rough, broken. Thomas held the envelope as if it were a treasure. "Are you Anne? The one who rides here accompanied by a lady? The same one who was here days ago?" Anne stood up slowly, her heart beginning to beat faster. "I am, thank heavens." Thomas held out the letter, his hands trembling slightly. "He made me swear I would deliver this. The day he left, there was an emergency. The oil leaked, almost extinguishing the lamp, and I forgot." His voice was heavy with guilt. "Forgive me, miss. I have carried this with me every day, hoping you would return. I am a fool, a complete fool." Anne took the envelope with hands that shook so much she almost dropped it. She recognized the handwriting immediately, elegant, firm, unmistakably his. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the letter to her chest. "Thank you." Thomas nodded, relieved, and discreetly walked away, heading back to the lighthouse. Anne stood still, looking at the sealed envelope, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might or might not contain. But she had to know. She sat down again on the rock and with trembling fingers broke the seal. "My Anne, if you are reading this, it is because I left before I could see you one last time. Forgive me." The tears started before she even finished the first line. "I received the unhappy news today that my brother has passed away. There are obligations I cannot postpone, responsibilities that only I can fulfill. I must return to the life I abandoned, but nothing has changed in my heart. Nothing. You continue to be the light that guides my path, the promise that makes me want to be better. Wait for me. I will wait for you. No matter how long it takes, no matter what obstacles arise, my heart is yours, as it always has been, as it always will be." Anne sobbed, the tears falling onto the paper, blurring the ink slightly. "Wear the ring. Remember the sailor's knot, something that does not unravel, that withstands all storms." She looked at her hand, where the ring remained hidden beneath her glove. "I will return for you. I swear by all that is sacred. I will return. Do not marry Anne, please. Trust me, trust us. I will find a way. I promise I will find a way." The letter ended with a symbol, the sailor's knot he had drawn for her that afternoon at the lighthouse, and beneath it simply, "Yours. Forever, Evander." Anne doubled over, the violent crying shaking her entire body. It was not abandonment. It never was. He had not betrayed her. He had not forgotten her. He loved her. Of course he loved her, and he would return. But when? How? And what if it was too late? Mr. Wickham would not wait forever. Her parents would not tolerate her refusal indefinitely. Soon, very soon, she would be forced to choose between complete ruin or a loveless marriage. Miss Anne, Margaret, approached cautiously. "We need to go back. Your mother will be furious if we are late." Anne wiped her face with the back of her hand, carefully tucked the letter into her bodice, next to her heart, and stood up on shaky legs. She mounted again, but now there was something different inside her. It was no longer pain. It was determination. Evander would return. He had promised, and she trusted him. Until then, she would resist. No matter the pressure, the threats, the pleas, she would not marry Wickham. Not as long as there was hope, however tenuous, however impossible, that true love could win. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the letter. 3 weeks of Anne feigning deep melancholy, which was not difficult considering the emptiness that consumed her. While resisting the increasingly insistent advances of Mr. Wickham, he came 2, sometimes 3 times a week. He brought flowers. He recited mediocre poetry. He spoke about his properties, his income, his plans. For the future, always including Anne in these plans without ever asking what she desired. Anne tolerated him with frigid politeness, answering in monosyllables, never smiling, never encouraging. But neither did she openly refuse. That would provoke a final crisis with her parents. Fortunately, a business trip had taken Wickham away for the last 10 days, giving Anne a brief respite from his suffocating presence. But now he was back, and that night, Anne was obligated to attend the Pemberton Ball, one of the most important events of the social season. To refuse would be a scandal. Her mother had made that very clear. "You will go," Mrs. Hartley had said that morning, her tone brooking no argument. "You will wear the emerald green gown. You will smile. You will dance with Mr. Wickham when he requests it, and you will behave like the lady I raised." Anne nodded mechanically, resigned. The carriage swayed gently as they approached the Pemberton residence. Anne looked out the window, discreetly touching the ring beneath her glove, her talisman, her anchor, the only thing preventing her from completely collapsing. "Remember," her mother said, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders, "Mr. Wickham will be present. He deserves your attention. Your father and I are losing patience with your coldness, Anne." "Yes, mother." "Smile, dance, show some interest." Mrs. Hartley sighed. "You don't have to love him immediately, but you must at least try." Anne forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I will try." But inside she was screaming. She wanted to jump from the moving carriage. She wanted to run to the beach, to the Lighthouse, to anywhere that was not that ballroom full of people suffocating her with impossible expectations. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door, extending his hand to help her descend. Anne took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and entered. The ballroom was impeccable. Hundreds of candles illuminated the room, reflecting in the Venetian mirrors and crystal chandeliers. Music floated through the air, a soft waltz played by a string quartet. Ladies in luxurious gowns chatted in groups, fans moving in precise rhythm. Gentlemen discussed politics and business, wineglasses in hand. Anne descended the staircase beside her parents, aware of the glances that followed her. The emerald green gown was indeed stunning, a fitted bodice highlighting her waist, a modest but elegant neckline, the skirt flowing in silk layers. Margaret had spent hours arranging her hair in elaborate curls, intertwined with velvet ribbon. She was beautiful. Anne knew it, but she felt empty. "Anne!" Mr. Wickham's voice cut through her thoughts. He crossed the ballroom towards her, a confident smile on his face. "What an enchanting vision. You are radiant tonight." Anne forced a polite smile. "Mr. Wickham, good evening. May I have the honor of putting my name on your dance card?" He was already extending his hand, presuming agreement. Anne hesitated, searching for an excuse, but felt her mother's sharp gaze upon her. My daughter would be delighted," Mrs. Hartley interrupted, smiling sweetly. "Wouldn't you, Anne?" Anne nodded, defeated. "Of course." Wickham took her card and wrote his name down for 3 different dances. 3. Anne felt nausea rise. When he finally moved away to greet other guests, Anne turned to her mother. 3 dances? That is excessive. People will think that... They will think correctly, her mother said firmly, that there is an understanding and commitment between you, as there should be. Anne opened her mouth to protest, but her mother silenced her with a look. "Behave yourself, Anne. Do not shame me tonight." The first dance with Wickham was torture. He talked incessantly about the weather, about the decor, about how beautiful Anne was, about how wonderful it would be to see her, presiding over his table. "I have plans to remodel the east wing of the property," he said as he guided her through the steps. "I thought you could supervise. Ladies have a special sensibility for decoration." "How kind," Anne murmured, the smile frozen on her face. "And naturally you will have the freedom to make changes. Within reason, of course. We cannot be extravagant." Anne barely listened. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for... What? She didn't know. She only knew that. She couldn't breathe properly, that the bodice seemed tighter and tighter, that every second there was agony. When the music finally ended, Wickham bowed. "It was divine, Miss Hartley. I look forward to the next one." Anne nodded, turning to escape, but her mother materialized beside her. "Smile, Anne," she whispered through clenched teeth. "You look as if you are going to the scaffold." "Perhaps I am," Anne replied softly. Her mother squeezed her arm, not gently. Behave. Are yourself. It was during the interval between the second and third dances that it happened. The Pemberton butler appeared at the top of the staircase, striking his staff 3 times to command attention. "His lordship," he announced in a voice that echoed through the hall, "the Earl of Ashmore." The entire ballroom froze. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. Fans stopped moving. Glasses were suspended in mid-air. All eyes turned to the staircase. And there he was, Evander Rowden. Anne felt the world tilt. He descended the steps with a natural elegance that stole the air from any room. He wore impeccable evening attire, a perfectly cut black coat, a grey silk waistcoat, a white cravat tied with precision. His dark hair was brushed back, highlighting the strong structure of his face. And those eyes, those blue-grey eyes that Anne knew so well, scanned the room with quiet authority. He was stunning, imposing, absolutely breathtaking. Audible gasps echoed among the single young ladies. Mothers discreetly nudged their daughters, already calculating possibilities. Gentlemen exchanged glances, some recognizing the name, others curious about the newcomer. "Earl of Ashmore," someone murmured nearby. "Never heard of him. He is from London," another gentleman replied. "I read about the succession in the newspapers. Old, honored family, considerable properties." Baron Hartley leaned in to hear better, his eyes gleaming with interest. But Anne barely heard the whispers around her. She only saw him, her Evander. The Earl briefly greeted Lord Pemberton, exchanged a few polite words with Lady Pemberton, then turned to the room, and his eyes met hers. The world disappeared. There was no more music, no more people, no more ballroom, only that gaze that crossed the distance and touched Anne's soul with physical force. Evander began to walk, directly towards her. He did not deviate, he did not hesitate. He simply crossed the ballroom with firm steps and unwavering purpose, his eyes fixed on Anne as if she were the only person in the entire universe. "Who is that?" Mrs. Hartley whispered, alarmed. "The Earl of Ashmore, apparently," the Baron replied, his voice heavy with interest. "Coming straight towards us." Wickham materialized beside Anne, possessive, clearly uncomfortable. But Evander did not notice him. He stopped directly in front of Anne and bowed, not too deep, but enough to show respect. "Miss Hartley," he said, his grave voice sending waves of heat through her body. "What a pleasure to meet you again. Meet you again." The word did not go unnoticed by Anne's parents, but she barely cared. "Your lordship," she managed to say, her voice trembling. Evander extended his hand. "May I have the honor of putting my name on your dance card?" Anne looked at the extended hand. Strong, elegant, the same one that held her on the beach, that drew the sailor's knot, that touched her face with impossible tenderness, that awakened marvelous sensations in her. She held out her card with fingers that visibly trembled. Evander took it, his fingers brushing hers for an instant that seemed like eternity. He wrote his name, once on the next available dance, then returned the card. "Until then, Miss Hartley." He bowed again, this time to Anne's parents, then walked away with the same elegance with which he had arrived. Anne stood paralyzed, looking at the card, where his name was written in firm, familiar handwriting. "Evander Rowden." "Well," Mrs. Hartley said, clearly surprised, "that was unexpected." "Interesting," the Baron murmured, studying Evander with calculating eyes. "Very interesting." Wickham, beside Anne, had a face red with contained anger, but Anne saw none of that. She only held the card against her chest, feeling her heart pound so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. He came. He truly came. The musicians positioned themselves to play the next dance. Evander crossed the ballroom again, and this time everyone watched. Conversations dropped to whispers. Fans moved slower. Curious eyes followed his every step. He stopped in front of Anne and offered his hand. "Miss Hartley." Anne placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth even through her gloves. Her legs trembled as he guided her to the center of the floor. His hand rested on her waist, respectable, appropriate, but still making every nerve in. Anne's body awakened. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and they began to dance. The music began, a slow, romantic waltz that Anne had known since childhood. For a few beats they simply moved in silence, perfectly synchronized, as if they had danced together 1,000 times before. Then Evander spoke, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You are even more beautiful than I remembered." Anne felt tears burn. "You came back," she whispered. I thought, I know." His hand lightly squeezed her waist. "Forgive me, I should have found a way to reach you sooner." "No." Anne shook her head, her eyes fixed on his. "You had to leave. Your brother. I am so sorry, Evander. I am so sorry for your loss." Something crossed his face. Pain, gratitude, tenderness. "Thank you." They twirled, and Anne realized that everyone was watching them. Not discreetly, openly. "They are looking at us," she murmured. "Let them look." His eyes swept over her face as if he were memorizing every detail. "Let them see that I have found the most extraordinary woman in this ballroom, in this region, in this world. Evander, I see the ring," he said softly, his eyes dropping to her hand on his shoulder, where the blue stone ring sparkled over the white glove. "You kept it. I never took it off." Anne felt a tear escape. "Not for a day, not for an hour." Evander smiled, that rare, true smile that completely transformed his face, and the world truly disappeared. There was no more ballroom, no more people, no more music, only the two of them spinning together, finally reunited. "I confess I nearly died," Anne confessed, her voice breaking, "when I thought you had abandoned me. I nearly died of sadness." His jaw clenched, his eyes darkening. "Never. I could never abandon you. Even if the whole world placed itself between us, I would return. I would always return. I would find a way." The letter, the lighthouse keeper. "Forgot to deliver it. I only received it weeks later." Evander locked his jaw, a look of surprise crossing his face. "Weeks?" His voice came out tense. "You spent weeks thinking that I—" "It doesn't matter now." Anne squeezed his shoulder. "Nothing else matters. You are here. You came back." "Anne," he pulled her imperceptibly closer, beyond what propriety allowed. "Forgive me. I couldn't risk sending a letter to your house. If your parents intercepted it, if they found out. Before I could present myself properly, I know it was sensible." She forced a trembling smile. "Even though it almost killed me. I went to the lighthouse, but your friend was very busy. He said you had left and weren't coming back to the lighthouse. But he forgot the letter. I was desolate." They twirled again, and Anne realized they were in the center of the ballroom, all the other dancers unconsciously making space, creating a circle around them. And Evander's hands transmitted warmth to her back. "I'm sorry you suffered. Let's forget it, that you are here now and you are an earl," she said, still processing. "A real earl. I am now." Evander held her gaze. "I inherited the title when my brother passed away. All the properties, responsibilities, the burden I spent years pushing away. And you came back for me. I came back for you." He said it with such intensity that Anne felt it to her very bones. "I took the title I would have rejected. I returned to the life I despised, because now I can offer you everything you deserve. I can ask for your hand without your family rejecting me for lack of position." Anne felt more tears fall. "I don't care about titles. I never did." "I know." Evander smiled sadly. "But the world cares, your family cares, and I will not allow you to suffer because of me. I will not allow you to be disinherited, dishonored, rejected, or socially ostracized for choosing me. So you really came for me." "I came as the man who loves you." He twirled her one last time, the music beginning to slow, a smile brighter than the sun drawing itself on his masculine face. "I came back to find my countess, if she still wants me." Anne laughed, a sound caught between joy and tears. "She never stopped wanting you, not for a second." The music ended. Evander held her hand for a moment longer than appropriate, his eyes saying everything words could not. Promises, devotion, love that had withstood separation and doubt. Finally, with visible reluctance, he guided her back to where her parents were waiting. Baron and Mrs. Hartley watched with expressions that mixed surprise, interest, and confusion. "Baron Hartley, Baroness," Evander bowed formally. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. Evander Roden, Earl of Ashmore." The Baron extended his hand, clearly impressed. "It is an honor to meet you, your lordship. Is this your first visit to our region?" "Not precisely." Evander smiled politely. "But I hope it won't be the last." "Certainly not." The Baron exchanged a meaningful look with his wife. "We are delighted by your presence. In fact," Evander continued, his voice firm, confident, "I am looking to establish myself. After years in London, I realize I need something more meaningful in life. Mrs. Hartley leaned slightly forward, clearly interested. A property in the region, perhaps? Among other things. Evander's eyes briefly slid to Anne before returning to her parents. Primarily, I am looking for a wife, someone from a respectable family, of strong character, of integrated spirit. The silence that followed was charged. I understand, the Baron said slowly, his eyes gleaming with sudden comprehension. And you would like to get to know the local families better. I will be direct, Mr. Hartley. I would like to pay you a formal visit, Evander said directly. Tomorrow, if it is convenient, to speak properly about future possibilities. Anne felt her heart explode in her chest. Her mother's eyes widened. Her father smiled, a genuine, interested smile. Tomorrow would be perfectly suitable, the Baron said, extending his hand again. Shall we say at 3 in the afternoon? 3 will be perfect. Evander shook his hand, then turned to Anne and bowed. Miss Hartley, it was an honor to dance with you. I will count the minutes until I see you tomorrow. Anne could barely respond, her smile so wide it hurt. I will look forward to it, your lordship. Evander walked away, crossing the ballroom again, which opened around him like the sea before a powerful ship. Anne turned and saw her mother looking at her with a completely transformed expression. There was no more disapproval, only marveling surprise. Anne, Mrs. Hartley whispered, you smiled. For the first time in weeks, you truly smiled. Yes, Anne replied, discreetly touching the ring beneath her glove. Yes, mother. I felt like smiling. Across the ballroom, Anne saw Mr. Wickham observing the scene with a face red with fury and defeat. He was clearly beaten, completely overshadowed by the elegant and powerful Earl who had appeared from nowhere and captured all the attention, not just Anne's but the entire ballroom's. But Anne felt no pity. She felt only relief, joy, hope that finally didn't seem foolish or impossible. The Baron approached his wife, his eyes still following Evander. An Earl, he murmured. A London Earl, interested in our Anne. Yes, Mrs. Hartley said, marveling. Who would have thought? The girl rejected the baronet, but was immediately captivated by the Earl. They had no idea. They had not the slightest idea that this elegant Earl was the same man Anne had met on the beach, the lighthouse keeper who had stolen her heart long before he wore a noble title. And Anne wouldn't tell them. Not yet. She would let them find out in due time. For now, she just held the dance card where his name was written and allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to believe that maybe, just maybe, happy endings were not just fairy tales. Maybe they were real. Maybe they were possible. Maybe they were hers. The black carriage bearing the Earl's coat of arms stopped outside Hartley Manor at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Anne watched from the parlour window, her heart beating so hard she feared she might faint. She had spent the entire morning in a state of frantic nervousness, changing her gown 3 times, redoing her hair twice, unable to eat anything for lunch. Now, seeing Evander step out of the carriage with natural elegance, wearing an impeccable suit, navy blue coat, grey waistcoat, perfectly tied cravat, Anne felt her legs weaken. Step away from the window, Anne, her mother said, but the voice was excited, not disapproving. It is not proper for him to see you. Arrive. Anne obeyed, sitting on an armchair with her hands clasped in her lap, trying to appear serene when inside she was a storm. The butler announced, His Lordship, the Earl of Ashmore. Evander entered the parlour, and Anne had to restrain herself from running to him. He greeted the Baron with a firm handshake, bowed to the Baroness with impeccable courtesy, and finally his eyes met Anne's. Miss Hartley, he bowed, and there was a promise in that simple gesture. Your Lordship, Anne managed to say, her voice trembling only slightly. Please have a seat, Lord Roden, the Baron said, indicating the main armchair. Can we offer you tea? Brandy? Tea would be suitable, thank you. A polite ritual followed of serving tea, comments about the weather, courteous questions about the journey from London. Evander responded with the ease of someone who was born for it, which, Anne now realized, was exactly the case. Finally, the Baron leaned forward. Well, Lord Roden, I imagine you have not come merely for discussions about the weather. Evander smiled briefly. Then his expression became serious, respectful. No, sir. I have come with a specific purpose. But first, I need to know if the young lady is committed to any other man. The Baron looked at his wife and then at his daughter. Then he replied with an almost solemn air. In fact, she had received a proposal from Mr. Wickham, but she declined, so the previously agreed. Arrangements were broken off this morning. He was not at all pleased, but if my daughter did not accept, I have to consider her feelings. We cannot force her. The Earl observed him with shrewd, silent eyes. There was the hypocrisy and lie he so abhorred. Heavens! But he would not ruin this moment with judgment. That being the case, he placed the cup aside and stood up, his posture straight, a natural bearing of command. Baron Hartley, Baroness, I have come to formally ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. The silence that followed was absolute. Anne held her breath. Her mother's eyes widened. Her father remained motionless for a long moment. But Mrs. Hartley recovered first. Sir, forgive me, but you barely know each other. Only one dance yesterday. With all respect, madam, Evander interrupted gently. Sometimes a lifetime of acquaintance fits into brief moments. His eyes met Anne's. I recognized rare qualities in your daughter. Intelligence, strength of character, integrity, and if you'll allow me to be honest, I felt an immediate connection that I have never experienced before. The Baron studied him with calculating eyes. Those are beautiful words, Earl. But marriage is a practical matter. It requires compatibility of position, of expectations. I agree entirely. Evander turned to face him directly. I have considerable properties in London and the countryside, annual incomes that total at least £15,000. The title comes with responsibilities that I take seriously. Your daughter would be a countess. She would preside over one of the oldest houses in England. She would have security, position, everything a lady of her birth deserves. Anne saw her father's expression changing, interest turning into approval, calculations being made, advantages being weighed. And as for your character, sir? Mrs. Hartley asked. Forgive my frankness, but a mother needs to. No. Are there vices, debts, scandals? None. Evander answered without hesitation. My reputation is clean. I can provide references from any gentleman in London if you wish. The Baron exchanged a look with his wife. Anne saw the decision forming, saw the approval growing. Well, her father said slowly, these are impressive credentials, but there is still the matter of my daughter's feelings. Anne, do you— I accept, Anne interrupted, unable to contain herself any longer. If his lordship wants me, I accept. Her mother looked shocked by the interruption, but her father smiled. I see my daughter shares your enthusiasm, your lordship. Then do I have your permission? Evander asked, his voice firm. The Baron stood up, extending his hand. You do, sir. You have my complete blessing and approval. Evander shook his hand, then bowed to Mrs. Hartley. You honor me immensely. I promise I will care for your daughter with all the devotion and respect she deserves. I am sure you will. The mother was smiling now, clearly delighted with the prospect of her daughter becoming a countess. Well, there is much to plan. The wedding must be appropriate to the position. Naturally, Evander agreed. But first, if you will allow me, I would like a few moments alone with my fiancée to speak properly. The Baron hesitated. That would not be entirely proper. With a companion present, naturally, Evander added. Miss Hartley's lady's companion could supervise. This calmed the objections. Margaret was summoned, and the parents discreetly withdrew, leaving Anne and Evander in the parlor with Maggie respectfully positioned near the door. As soon as they were relatively alone, Anne stood up, wanting to run to him but restraining herself. Evander, Anne. He approached, taking her hands. My Anne. Finally. I can't believe it. She squeezed his fingers. I can't believe this is happening. It is, and nothing will separate us again. He pulled her to sit beside him on the sofa, maintaining an appropriate distance but holding her hands. But I need to tell you something. You need to know the truth before committing completely to me. Anne felt her chest tighten. What truth? Evander took a deep breath. About why I became a lighthouse keeper. Why I abandoned my life. You don't have to. I must. He held her gaze. You deserve to know who I truly am. What I did. Why I ran away. Anne nodded, waiting. A few years ago, Evander began, his voice heavy, my brother Adrian became involved with a young woman. She was the daughter of one of the servant families on our properties, loyal people, held in high regard by me. I had known them since childhood. Anne felt something cold run down her spine, but she remained silent, letting him continue. Adrian was fascinated by her. He visited her frequently, made promises. Evander's jaw clenched. She was innocent. He seduced her, and then she became pregnant. Anne held her breath. As a gentleman, as the lord of those lands, Adrian had an obligation to protect that family. They were under our authority, our responsibility, but he took advantage of it, of the position of power, of the trust they placed in him. What happened? Anne asked softly. When my parents found out, they were horrified, not by the injustice committed, but by the potential scandal. Evander's voice was filled with bitterness. They arranged for the entire family to leave for another region, without proper references, only with a small financial compensation. They left the girl dishonored, pregnant, without a future, and considered the child merely a disposable bastard. Anne covered her mouth, horrified. Her brother came to find my family, Evander continued. He demanded reparation. It was his right. He should have been heard with respect. But Adrian, he closed his eyes, the pain evident. Adrian sent some men to beat the young man as a warning, as a threat to silence him through fear. My God! I confronted my brother. Evander's hands were trembling now. I told him he should take responsibility, marry her, or at least ensure that she and the child were adequately provided for, placed in safety in some house so that we could guarantee good conditions for the child. But my father and Adrian did what nobles always do. They covered up the sin with a ridiculous sum of money, enough to silence, not to repair, maintaining an untainted image at the expense of the weakest. Anne squeezed his hands, tears streaming down. I tried to find the family, Evander said, his voice breaking. I wanted to offer real support, true help, but I couldn't find them. I suspect they were sent to America. I never knew if she had the child, if she kept it, if they survived. He looked at Anne, his eyes full of old pain, and that filled me with such profound revulsion that I could no longer be part of that environment. Evander, I am so sorry. It was too much hypocrisy, Anne, too much injustice. He held her gaze. They proclaim honor to the four winds. They talk about duty, decency, respectable position, but they do not act in accordance with what they claim. They steal the most sacred thing from the weakest, dignity. Anne understood then. She understood completely. Shortly after, Adrian became engaged to another lady, Evander continued, from an influential family as was suitable, and he forbade everyone from telling her about the affair with the maid and the possible child. I could not allow that. I could not let that young woman marry with such a grave secret hidden. I knew the young woman a respectable and much-loved lady. She deserved to know who she was uniting with. What did you do? I wrote a letter. Evander gave a bitter smile. I told her she needed to know the true character of the man she was going to marry. Adrian was furious. The engagement was broken off. My father called me a family traitor. You did the right thing. Adrian didn't think so. Evander's voice was hoarse. He called me a coward for betraying him and for abandoning the family when my father was already old. He said I didn't understand loyalty, responsibility, but I couldn't stay there anymore. It was incompatible with the honest and dignified life I wished to live. Anne touched his face, wiping away a tear he hadn't even noticed had fallen. And you left. I left with nothing. Evander looked at her. I went to the furthest place I could find. I became a lighthouse keeper because I wanted to isolate myself completely for a while, and I wanted honest work, something that saved lives, that protected the vulnerable, that made a real difference, not a pretense of nobility while destroying innocent people. Oh, Evander. Adrian never married. His voice was thick now. He lived for years in debauchery, without commitment, without heirs. A little while after I left, my father died. Adrian inherited the title, but he died because of a severe fever before starting a family. Now only my mother remains, the Dowager Countess who lives in Hampshire at her new sister's property, the Viscountess of Vermont. He took a deep breath, collecting his feelings, and when I finally received the news of his death, I realized we would never reconcile. Evander closed his eyes. That he died thinking I was a coward, that he hated me for exposing his shame, and maybe he was right. Maybe leaving was cowardice. Maybe I should have stayed to confront him and try to make him find the path of virtue. No. Anne held his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. It wasn't cowardice. It was honor. It was refusing to be complicit in cruelty. It was choosing integrity over convenience. You tried, But he didn't. Listen. But now I've returned. Evander covered her hands with his own. I returned to the world I scorned. I accepted the title that was his, the position of nobility that I rejected, because you made me realize that I can do things differently, that I can use the power I have now to protect, not destroy, to honor the vulnerable, not exploit them. He pulled her slightly closer. I found what I needed in the lighthouse to understand myself, to rediscover myself, the silence, the hard, meticulous work, the peace, until you appeared. He smiled, still with tears in his eyes, and turned my life upside down, my love. You showed me that I could have both, honor and love, dignity and passion, a meaningful life alongside an extraordinary woman. Anne felt her chest explode with emotion. That's why I will always honor you, Evander whispered, because you saved me. You showed me that there was still reason to believe, to try, to return, and do things differently. Anne could no longer hold back. She pulled him into an embrace, not caring about decorum, about Margareth watching, about anything other than the need to hold this extraordinary man who carried such deep pain, but still chose goodness. I love you, she whispered against his shoulder. I love you more than words can express, and I swear I will spend every day showing that your choice was worth it. It already was. Evander held her tightly. The moment I saw you on that beach, it was already worth it. They stayed like that for a long moment, intertwined, finally together, finally safe. When they separated, Evander smiled, that rare smile that transformed his entire face. So you will be my countess? Anne laughed through her tears. I will be your wife. Countess is just a title, but wife? She touched his chest, over his heart. Wife is what truly matters. My wife. Evander repeated the words like a sacred promise. Forever, forever. And in that sunlit parlor, with Margareth smiling discreetly near the door, two hearts finally found their safe harbor. Together, forever. The morning of the wedding dawned clear, with an impossible blue sky and golden sunlight that seemed to bless the union. Anne woke early, her heart beating so hard she could barely breathe. Margaret was already in the room, arranging the wedding gown that hung like a delicate cloud over the screen, satin in a soft pink, almost pearl shade, embroidered with gold, threads that caught the light. Good morning, Miss Anne, Maggie said, smiling. Or should I get used to Lady Rowden? Anne laughed, nervous and happy at the same time. Not yet, Maggie. I'm still just Anne for a few more hours. But as she said it, she touched the blue ring she had never taken off her finger. Today it would no longer be hidden. Today, the entire world would see it. The door opened, and Mrs. Hartley entered, already dressed for the ceremony. But with an expression Anne couldn't quite decipher. There was something there, curiosity perhaps, or uncertainty. Mother, Anne greeted, surprised. I thought you would only come when it was time to leave for the church. I need to speak with you. Her mother sat in the armchair near the window, gesturing for Anne to sit on the vanity stool. Something has been bothering me since the ball. Anne exchanged a quick glance with Margaret, then sat down. What is it, Mother? Mrs. Hartley studied her for a long moment. That day at the ball when the Earl approached to greet you, he said it was a pleasure to meet you again. She leaned forward. Why did he say that, Anne? Had you been introduced to the Earl before the ball? Had you seen him before? Anne felt her heart quicken. She knew this moment would come. Perhaps it was even fitting to confess on the morning of the wedding, when nothing more could be done to stop it. The Earl? She said slowly. No, Mother, I did not. To know the Earl before the ball, then why did he say it was a pleasure to meet you again? Anne smiled, a small mischievous smile that surprised her mother. Well, Mother, I did not know the Earl of Ashmore before the ball. She paused deliberately. But Evander Roden, that is the man who loved me, and whom I loved too. Mrs. Hartley became very quiet. What do you mean by that? I mean, Anne spoke calmly without remorse, that the man you and Father accused of having dishonored me did nothing but love and honor me. At the time he was not yet an earl, but he was always a perfect gentleman. Anne, her mother's voice came out almost breathless. Unfortunately, by misfortune of fate, we separated at a crucial moment. Anne continued, firm. You confined me to this room, judging me harshly, and him. And he, at the same time, received news that his brother had died and had to return immediately to London to assume the title. Mrs. Hartley brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. But as you can see, Anne smiled, her eyes shining, he came back for me, to fulfill his word to ask me to marry him. As you can see, Mother, he is an honorable man, and that is why I fell in love with him, even when he was only a lighthouse keeper. Her mother nearly fell out of the chair. Lighthouse keeper? Are you saying that night? Yes, Mother. Anne nodded calmly. I was with him. My God. I know it was inappropriate, reckless, and indecorous. Anne stood up, approaching her mother. But he did not harm me. He did not take advantage of me. He said he would only touch me when I was truly his wife, and he kept his word. She held her mother's hands. My virtue has remained untouched until today, Mother, because he honored me, because he respected me, because he truly loved me. Mrs. Hartley breathed deeply, incredulous, processing everything. She looked at her daughter, at the radiant face, at the eyes sparkling with happiness, at the blue ring that she now understood had significance long before the formal proposal. You truly love him, she finally said, her voice low. It's not just the acceptance of a good match. You truly love him, with every fiber of my being, Anne confirmed. Since the first day I saw him emerging from the sea, since the first conversation in the lighthouse, since every stolen moment when we discovered that our souls are linked. Her mother remained silent for a long moment, then smiled, a small but genuine smile. Then you found a man of true worth. She stood up, embracing her daughter. Forgive me for having been so hard. But look, Anne. She pulled back, holding her daughter's shoulders. The circumstances suggested otherwise. Everything indicated that you had been seduced and... She shuddered. I don't even want to think about it. It is all right, Mother. Anne squeezed her hands. Today is my happiest day. Let us smile and be joyful. Mrs. Hartley nodded, discreetly wiping away a tear. Yes, let us prepare you to become a countess. She smiled, this time with genuine pride. A countess who chose her own destiny, who followed her heart, and who apparently chose well. I chose perfectly, Anne corrected, smiling. The ritual of preparation continued, but now with a different lightness. Her mother helped Margaret, making small suggestions, arranging stray curls, ensuring that every detail was perfect. A perfumed bath with lavender and rose essence, hair brushed until it shone, then styled into elaborate curls intertwined with tiny pearls. The dress, delicate pink satin with gold embroidery, long sleeves of French lace, a train that flowed like water with the slightest movement. When she was finally ready, Anne looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized herself. You are beautiful, miss, Margaret whispered, her eyes tearful. Absolutely stunning. You are perfect, her mother. Her agreed, adjusting the delicate veil. Your father will be speechless. Anne touched the ring over the white glove. Today she wore it on top, as at the ball, visible, proclaiming to the world what had always been true. She belonged to Evander, and he to her. I am ready, she said, turning to the two women who had helped her reach this point. I am ready to become Lady Rowden. Then let us go, her mother said, extending her hand. Your future awaits. And together, they left the room towards the carriage that would take Anne to the church, to Evander, to the rest of her life. The church was packed. All the local society had attended, along with several families from London, Evander's friends and acquaintances who had made the journey to witness the wedding of the Earl of Ashmore. Evander waited at the altar, impeccable in his ceremonial attire, black tailcoat, pearl grey silk waistcoat, perfectly tied white cravat. His hair was slicked back, emphasizing the strong structure of his face. But it was his expression that made him truly extraordinary. When the doors opened and Anne appeared on her father's arm, Evander couldn't hide anything. The love, the pride, the adoration, it was all stamped on his face for everyone to see. Anne walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on him, only him. The world around her blurred, the flowers, the candles, the guests. Nothing existed but the man who waited for her, as if she were the only thing that mattered in the universe. When she reached the altar, the Baron placed Anne's hand in Evander's. Take good care of her, he said quietly. With my life, Evander replied, his voice firm. The vicar began the ceremony, but Anne barely heard the words. She was lost in Evander's eyes, seeing reflected there everything she felt. Love so deep it hurt, a promise so absolute that it needed no words. "Do you take this man as your lawful husband?" the vicar asked. "I do," Anne said, her voice clear without hesitation. "And do you take this woman as your lawful wife?" "I do." Evander smiled, that rare, transforming smile. "I always did, from the very first moment." There were soft murmurs among the guests, but no one cared about the deviation from protocol. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The vicar smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Evander gently pulled Anne close and kissed her. It was not a chaste, ceremonial kiss. It was a promise, devotion, love proclaimed before God and witnesses. When they parted, Anne was flushed, her eyes shining, and Evander couldn't stop smiling. They were one, finally, irrevocably, perfectly one. The reception was magnificent. Hartley Manor had been transformed. Flowers everywhere, tables covered with fine linen cloths, crystals gleaming in the light of hundreds of candles. Musicians played in the corner of the hall, and guests danced, conversed, celebrated. But Anne and Evander barely noticed. Seated at the main table, fingers intertwined beneath the cloth, they looked at each other as if discovering something new every moment. "My wife," Evander murmured, testing the words. "My husband," Anne replied, smiling. He lifted her hand, kissing the ring over the glove. "Finally, I can do this without hiding." "Finally," Anne agreed, her eyes tearful. "Finally, we do not need secrets." They left at nightfall for Evander's property, a manor house 2 hours away where they would spend their first weeks as a couple. The carriage swayed gently along the road, and Anne leaned against Evander's shoulder, feeling the day's fatigue but also nervous excitement for what was to come. "Are you nervous?" Evander asked softly. "A little," Anne admitted. "It is all so new." "For me too." He kissed the top of her head. "But we have time to discover it together." When they arrived, the manor was illuminated, servants respectfully waiting at the entrance. Evander got out first, then extended his hand to help Anne. "Welcome home, Lady Roden." Anne looked at the imposing facade, the illuminated windows, and felt something expand within her chest. Home. Not a gilded cage, not a suffocating obligation, but home, with the man she loved. The first days were a delicate discovery. Evander showed her every room of the manor, introduced her to the servants, and instructed the housekeeper to acquaint her with the house routine, catering to her wishes. Anne absorbed quickly, bringing her own touch, fresh flowers in the corridors, open windows to let the air circulate, genuine kindness with every employee. "The house already feels different," Evander said one afternoon, watching her arrange roses in a vase. "More alive." "It was just waiting to be loved," Anne replied, smiling. In the evenings they dined together, conversing, making plans for the future, memories of the past, shared dreams. "I want to make a difference," Anne said one night. "As a countess, I have position, resources. I want to use them well. How? There are so many families in need." She leaned forward, her eyes shining. "Unprotected women, children without education. We could help, truly help." Evander held her hand across the table. "Then we shall help, my love." He smiled. "You make me want to be better. You always have. And you make me feel free." Anne squeezed his fingers. "For the first time in my life, truly free." The nights were a discovery of a new kind for both of them, an intimacy made of tenderness, respect, and a contained passion that grew with the same softness as the trust they were building. Evander treated her as something precious, guiding her with gestures that revealed new feelings, no haste, no boldness, but the beauty of being desired and cared for, with passion. And Anne did not want to stop. She wanted to know him completely. She wanted to give herself without reserve to the man she loved. And when they finally allowed their love to find its fullest form, without haste, without rupture, just the shared decision to belong to each other, Anne understood what true union was. Afterward, resting together in that quiet post-silence, Evander caressed her loose hair, kissed her temple, and murmured words of love that filled everything around them. "I never imagined it could be like this," he confessed one night. "I never imagined love could be so complete." "Neither did I." Anne traced lazy patterns on his chest. "I used to think marriage would only bring me duties and unhappiness, but this is freedom. Freedom to be completely myself with someone who accepts all of me. I will always accept you." Evander turned her to face him. every part of you. The good, the difficult, the complicated, everything. Anne kissed him long, pouring into the gesture what words could not reach. Weeks passed in a happy bubble. They learned each other. Small habits, subtle. Preferences, particular rhythms. Anne discovered that Evander liked to read at night, that he had occasional nightmares about the past, that he became particularly tender after storms. Evander learned that Anne played the harp when anxious, that she laughed in her sleep, that she completely lit up when she spoke of things she loved. "Are you happy?" he asked one morning, watching her take breakfast in bed, her hair loose, a smile on her face. "Delirious," Anne replied, smiling. "Frighteningly happy. Sometimes I'm afraid to wake up and discover it was all a dream." Evander leaned in, kissing her softly. "It is not a dream. It is real. We are real." "Yes," Anne whispered against his lips. "We are." Eventually, they needed to return to the world. There were social obligations, visits to make, responsibilities of the title to fulfill. Evander needed to take his seat in the House of Lords, manage the properties, receive other nobles. Anne gradually adapted to her new position. She learned to preside over formal dinners, to converse with duchesses and marchionesses, to navigate the complexities of high society with the refined and polished education with which she had been raised. But she never lost her essence. She remained kind to servants, generous to the needy, authentic in every interaction. "You are an extraordinary countess," Evander said one night, after a particularly successful dinner. "Better than I ever could have hoped." "I learn from the best," Anne replied, touching his face. "You showed me that position does not have to corrupt, that power can be used for good, that we can be noble in status while maintaining integrity, kindness, and justice. We make a good combination. The best, my dear." And there, in the room they now shared, in the house that was now theirs, in each other's arms, Anne and Evander built a life that honored both love and duty. It was not perfect. There were challenges, adjustments, difficult moments, but it was theirs. True, authentic, built on a foundation of respect, passion, and conscious choice. And that, Anne realized more each day, was everything she had ever wanted, everything she had ever needed, just true love, and the freedom to live it fully. 2 years later, the afternoon was warm and pleasant when the carriage stopped at the base of the cliff. Anne stepped out first, breathing deeply of the salty air that always calmed her, then turned to receive the precious bundle Evander handed her. Thomas Evander Roden was 6 months old, with dark hair like his father and curious eyes like his mother. He looked around with fascination, his chubby little hands trying to reach everything he saw. "He loves this place," Evander said, stepping down beside them, wrapping an arm around Anne's shoulders as they walked. "He already knows this place is special." "Of course he does." Anne kissed her son's forehead. "This is where his parents first met. This is where it all began." Margaret followed a few steps behind, smiling at the sight of the little family gathered. Thomas Brennan still looked after the lighthouse, and he waved from the top when he saw them arrive. They walked to the beach, to that rock where so many important conversations had taken place. Anne sat down, settling the baby on her lap, while Evander sat beside her, his arm around her, completing the perfect circle. "I never tire of this place," Evander murmured, looking out at the sea. "It saved me from myself." "It saved us," Anne corrected, leaning her head on his shoulder. Thomas gurgled happily, and Evander extended a finger for his son to grasp. The baby squeezed with surprising strength, making his parents laugh. "He has his father's strength," Anne observed, "and his mother's curiosity," Evander added, kissing her temple. They stayed like that for a long moment, just absorbing the peace of that place, the sound of the waves, the gentle wind, the feeling of completeness. Then Anne straightened up, looking at Evander with an expression he knew well, that mix of determination and nervousness that meant she had something important to say. "Evander, I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, frowning slightly. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, better than all right." Anne smiled, then looked at Margaret. "Maggie, could you take Thomas for a few moments?" Margaret immediately approached, extending her arms to receive the baby. "Of course, my lady, come here, my beautiful boy." Thomas went without resistance, accustomed to Maggie's loving arms. She began to hum softly as she walked down the beach, giving them privacy. Evander watched Anne with increasing attention. "What happened, my dear?" Anne took his hands, holding them firmly. "In the last few months at my charity meetings, I met the wife of an important London detective, Mrs. Morrison. We talked a lot. We became friends." She took a deep breath. "And I asked her husband for help." "Help? With what?" "To try and locate that family." Anne held his gaze. "The family of the former servants at your house. The girl, her brother. Those whom your brother and your parents sent away and whose whereabouts you sought without success." Evander became completely motionless, his eyes wide. "Anne, I know." She squeezed his hands. "I know it might seem like meddling. I took some information from your study. Without your permission, forgive me for that, but it was with good intentions. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to raise your hopes until I had something concrete. So we searched for months because I thought you deserved peace. You deserved to know where they were." Evander couldn't speak. He just looked at her as if he were seeing something impossible, miraculous. Anne released one of his hands and took a sealed envelope from her dress pocket. She held it out, with hands that trembled slightly. "I received this morning. Mr. Morrison is very efficient." Evander took the envelope, looking at it as if it might burn his hands. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and pulled out the letter. Anne watched as he read, seeing every emotion pass across his face: surprise, relief, joy, tears that began to flow without him noticing. When he finished, he lowered the letter, his voice coming out hoarse. "They are here, in England, alive." "Yes." Anne smiled through her own tears. "In a rural village to the south, a few miles from here." Mr. Morrison included the complete address. Evander looked at the letter again, rereading certain parts. "We are aware of everything that happened to Lord Adrian and your father, and we regret the losses despite everything. We deeply appreciate the generous provision that the Countess of Ashmore sent, as well as the gifts for our little Jane. We are more grateful than words can express, and we also thank your lordship for having searched for us for so long. We always knew you were a truly noble man, even when all others failed. It would be an honor to receive you if you wish to visit and meet the girl. She has Adrian's features, but a kind heart like yours, my lord." "Jane," Evander whispered, his voice breaking. "She had the child, a girl." "Yes." Anne tenderly wiped away his tears. "And now you can meet her. You can finally do what you always wanted to do, help them. Truly, ensure education, protection, and love." Evander pulled Anne into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her hair, his body shaking with silent sobs. "You gave me everything," he said against her neck. "Everything, Anne. Love, family, purpose, and now this. You deserve peace," Anne whispered, hugging him with equal strength. "You deserve to know that you can repair the past, that not everything is lost." Evander pulled back just enough to cup her, face in his hands. "How can I thank you? How can I—" "By being happy," Anne smiled through her tears. "By being the extraordinary man you always were, and by letting me love you every day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her, deeply, desperately, pouring into the gesture all the gratitude, all the love, all the adoration he felt. When they parted, Evander rested his forehead against hers. "We will visit them," he said, his voice firm despite the tears. "Soon. I want to meet Jane, and give that family the certainty that we will never abandon them." "Yes," Anne smiled. "That will be wonderful." The sun began to set on the horizon when they finally got up from the rock. Margaret was still walking with Thomas on the beach, the baby now asleep in her arms. The lighthouse shone a light on top of the cliff, the light revolving, sending luminous beams over the darkening sea. Evander pulled Anne close, both of them looking at that tower that had changed their lives so completely. "Do you remember when you said I was like a lighthouse for you?" he asked softly. "Saving you from the shipwreck? I remember every word I ever said to you. You were right, but also incomplete." She turned to face him. "Because you are my lighthouse too. You saved me in so many ways, my love. We are light for each other." Evander smiled, that transforming smile that Anne loved more than anything. "The light between two worlds," he said. "You brought me from isolation into love, and I brought you from a prison into freedom. And now," Anne completed, looking to where Thomas slept in Maggie's arms, "we created a new light together, new life, new hope." Evander kissed her again, gently this time, as the sun completely sank below the horizon and the first star appeared in the sky. Behind them, the lighthouse kept turning, its light cutting through the darkness, guiding lost ships to a safe harbor, just as Anne and Evander had guided each other. Through storms, doubts, separations, and fears, until they finally found what they had always sought. Not just love, but completeness. Not just passion, but peace. Not just a promise, but fulfillment. And there, on that beach where it had all begun, with the lighthouse shining above and the sea whispering all around, Anne and Evander remained intertwined. Two worlds that became one. Two lights that shone together, forever. The light between two worlds. If you stayed until the end and loved the story of Anne and Evander, please leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more romances that touch the heart. And please, share and click the hype button. That way, our story flies further. Thank you for watching. I await you in the video.